Hi, everyone. I'm Kimbyrleigha, and this is Kimbyrleigha Live, where I talk about new and ongoing true crime cases, as well as break down trials and provide some commentary. A little bit of legal analysis here and there, in an easy to understand manner, of course, but mostly I just hang out with all of the law baddies on almost daily basis, but sometimes I need some rest. I also have another true crime channel here on YouTube. It's just my name, Kimbyrleigha. I do a lot of storytelling on there in narrative format. And I also have a video podcast with my husband, Jonathan, and that's called Dark Livity. If you want to check them out, look in the description box. You can learn more about that and more about me. Hello to everyone that's in the live chat. Those are my law baddies. No, I have to tell you something. I was exhausted, so I'm a little bit behind, but guess what? I heard some of you are behind too, so I'm like, yay. I know we're currently on day 31, a whole month. We're not even counting the weekends. That's a long trial so far. But yes, I'm back on day 29. I wanted to be thorough. I didn't just want to put out where we are now. I wanted to go back. I already watched everything. I had a lot of things to say. So if you are watching these recaps, that's wonderful that you're here for it for the first time. If you've already seen this part, we're going to recap it anyway. And it has been hectic in the courtroom. It started out with drama. Well, actually, just motions, but there were some points in the motion hearings, outside the presence of the jury, of course, that made me want to pull my hair out. It started with the Commonwealth's justification for wanting to provide a rebuttal witness, Dr. Crosby, and this was in relation to dog bites or their argument of lack thereof. And this was only if the defense raised the issue of dog bites. And spoiler alert, they do. But, you know, this was specifically related to La Posada. We haven't gotten there yet. Not in this video till the end of the video. She's coming up. She is a medical expert. But Brennan agreed they would not call Dr. Crosby in rebuttal unless Dr. La Posada, the dog bite expert, well, medical expert that's going to talk about dog bites, testified about it. But there was also a motion by the Commonwealth to limit her testimony. I was actually a little bit shocked. Let me know what you think about the judge actually granting this motion, that Dr. La Posada wasn't qualified enough to talk about dog bites. Okay, so what they did was limit it to her talking about animal bites, even though, well, their argument was that she only had done 5 dog bite autopsies, they said, I think. And the judge was just like, that's not enough to accept her as a dog bite expert without a voir dire. So they did one, by the way. And of course, the defense was arguing, wait a minute, she taught classes, she does pattern wound recognition, she's an expert there. But to cut to the chase, it was limited. But in all fairness, it comes up again, and I don't want to get into it yet. But they did that. There was also a short ruling on photos related to a private investigator that came in. We're going to hear from him in this video as well. And that was because there's a theory that John O'Keefe walked into the house or the garage, and that's based on that step count from his phone. So the garage photos were to demonstrate an alternative of what could happen, how he could have been harmed, gotten his injuries. Well, Brennan actually called this a baseless theory. I wouldn't go that far because we don't know. He called it a misdirection. And in the beginning, they were marked as for identification, but not as evidence. But we'll get back to that. So, all that was to say, we're still going to be hearing from one of the crash daddies. And this is Dr. Wolfe from ARCA. And the first thing he was shown were photos of Rescue Randy. Remember Rescue Randy? And this was from the 29-mile-per-hour impact test. Now, I realized that not a lot of people were on the last live. Number one, it was late. I apologize for that. And number two, I have to admit, it was a little dry. I think there's a lot more action to this one. So let's jump right in. And I'll be reading the comments in the live chat while I'm playing the first clip. So let's just jump in. And let me know your thoughts. While these are playing, I love when you comment what you're thinking, what you thought when you were first watching it, if you learned anything new. Here we go.
Dr. Wolfe, thank you for joining us again this morning. I'd like to draw your attention to a picture. Yeah, John?
Yes.
I'm going to show you. Do you remember seeing that photograph?
Yes.
You were shown this photograph last week, is that right?
Correct.
By Mr. Brennan, correct?
Correct.
Do you recognize the photo as the same photo that you were shown last week?
Yes.
Under questioning by Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
And what does that appear to be a photo of, just generally?
It appears to be a photo from of the test dummy from the 29 mile per hour impact test.
And does that appear to be a true and accurate photograph of the condition of the dummy following that 29 mile an hour crash test?
Yes.
With the court's permission, I'd like to enter this as next in order, please. If you could hand that to the forward corner.
Exhibit 218.
I have been watching Lori Daybell. I kind of fell asleep to that the other night. It was a little boring.
Permission to present that, Your Honor?
Yes.
Is this the photograph?
Yes.
Hi, Courtney. And hi, other Courtney.
Dr. Wolfe, first of all, what caused the damage? Well, let's start with the most basics. Which arm is this, left or right?
This is the left arm.
What position was, you called this dummy Rescue Randy, is that right?
Correct.
What
Yes.
position generally was Rescue Randy in upon impact during this test?
He was oriented such that the right side of his body and his right arm would be contacted by the vehicle.
What caused the defects in the and the damage to the sweatshirt as we see it here?
That was due to the interaction from the Rescue Randy sliding on the pavement surface to his position of final rest.
Is that sometimes called road rash?
Yes.
Did you see any road rash in any other place on Rescue Randy in this photograph?
Doesn't appear so in this photograph, no.
Can we highlight the face? What about there?
Sorry, I thought you were talking specific to the clothing. Yes, as I mentioned on Friday, there were signs of road rash to the body of the dummy itself, on the face and on the torso and arms.
Can we zoom in on the sleeve a little bit?
I thought
Do
I
you
put it on
see staining on the
1.25.
sleeve as well as the defects, the holes and the tears?
Yes.
What is that staining from?
Again, just from that sliding contact with the pavement, so it's just likely debris and kind of a film from the pavement surface being deposited onto the material.
In case you forget this part, Brennan was arguing or trying to argue, and this is going to come back full circle. We're going to see more of this. But remember, they want a cause related to this accident, the supposed accident, for why John O'Keefe had the holes in his hoodie. So they were talking about the holes last time, and you can clearly see these are not the same. These are road rash. There are marks. They're all over, not just on the arm, but we'll continue.
With regard to John O'Keefe's sweatshirt that you reviewed photographs of, did you see any other defects other than the right arm and the fact that it was cut off of him medically?
No.
Any other indication or any indication whatsoever of anything that you see consistent with road rash?
No.
Okay, let's go back to full frame. Just a second image I'd like you to take a look at. If we can have the lights for just a second. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
When they're
I
not at the
recognize it.
podium, it's going to be low. And if I try to make it louder for that, then it's going to be blaring. But he was just showed images. We already saw those. And there's damage to not only the clothing, but also the Rescue Randy doll, or I don't know if they call him, I don't think they're going to call him a doll, but mannequin, crash dummy. Actually, this one, it's been said by Brennan, oh, this one's for firefighters to learn how to rescue people from a burning house, theoretically. And Dr. Wolfe is like, no, he's, yes, used for that, but it can be used for other things as well, because he was just trying to argue, oh, you're not supposed to be using him for this. But you can see there is him sliding across the pavement in the 29 mile per hour impact test. He's got damage to the sweatshirt, tears, abrasions, and staining because there's dirt on the pavement. And this isn't supportive of the Commonwealth's argument. It's more towards the defense, because this would have happened to John O'Keefe had he been hit. But John O'Keefe didn't have these kind of injuries. He didn't have a scuff mark or road rash to his body like this. So I don't think we need to go further than this part. I just wanted to show you that that was clearly different. But now we're going to move on to another portion. And I think it's right here.
It is the front side of the test dummy from the 29 mile per hour full-on impact test.
Does that appear to be a true and accurate depiction of the condition of Rescue Randy in that sweatshirt after that 29-mile-an-hour impact?
Yes.
Move for the admission of that photograph, Your Honor, is next in order.
And now I'm curious. I don't know what the fed up thing is. Maybe I do and I'm getting confused, but let me know.
Permission to display?
Yes.
Can you describe what we're looking at in this photograph?
This is mainly showing the upper body of the test dummy from the 29 mile an hour impact test, showing the road rash to the front side of the body.
Were you shown this photograph on cross-examination?
No.
So again, he's just showing that there's also damage to the front, the torso, the face, the arms, which I kind of already alluded to, I guess, all consistent with a hard slide against pavement. None of this damage, though, is consistent with the condition of John O'Keefe's body or his clothing. The full body photo confirms that there's abrasions across his jeans, on his torso, on his chest. And I'm talking about Rescue Randy. And he also is now going to debunk the myth of knocked out of your shoes. Remember that?
What caused the holes in the bodice of the shirt? In other words, the part that covers the chest and the torso.
After the impact, the dummy was projected and sliding on the pavement surface. So again, this is consistent with the front side of the body sliding, making sliding contact with the pavement, creating those abrasions and holes. And again, that asphalt material transfer that you see on the front.
Can you go up back to the full frame, please? Do you see additional road rash? Take a look at his right arm.
Yeah.
You see additional road rash on Rescue Randy?
Yes.
On both the fabric and the arm itself?
Correct.
Go back to full frame. And can you see his face as well in this photograph?
Yes.
Are those the chin and nose defects that you saw?
Yes.
Are the defects in the shirt that you see here consistent with the condition of the shirt of John O'Keefe as you saw it in the photographs?
It is inconsistent.
Yeah, way more holes, way more damage. Way bigger holes, too. See if I can fast forward to the...
Dummy after the...
Different angle.
Yes.
Take a look at his torso, the exposed portion of his torso. Do you see road rash on his exposed torso?
Yes.
Do you also see that the road rash that you earlier described on the bodice of the shirt, the front of the shirt?
Oh,
Shoot.
I
This
do
impact.
remember that.
Tell us one more time, what was the speed of this impact?
This was a full-on 29 mile per hour impact.
We can take that down.
Did we miss the shoes?
This after the 29 mile.
On our impact. Display that?
Yes.
Yes.
And this is the condition of the vehicle after
And the
that
vehicle was
rearward
also
impact.
way more damaged. But he made a point, I think I might have missed it in that little area, but he said the whole shoes staying on, right? Well, these did at 29 mile per hour. But you know what? Again, I'm just playing devil's advocate, kind of looking both ways, thinking about what the jury might think. Is it the same as a human foot? Because I feel like a human foot would move differently, but I'm not the expert here. I'm not. But then here's the damage to the Lexus, which we did not see in Karen Reed's Lexus. And just another inconsistency, right? Her Lexus didn't have dents, damage as much as this one. So this would have been a full-on collision rather than just a side swipe. We already went over some of that.
About the shirt that you were shown on Friday, the left sleeve that you were shown on Friday with John O'Keefe's actual sweatshirt.
Was any of that consistent with?
Correct. Was that consistent or inconsistent, now that you've seen all the photographs, with the condition of the shirt that John O'Keefe was wearing on January 29th?
The test clothing was inconsistent compared to that of Mr. John O'Keefe's.
Thank you.
I know what you're talking about, and now I'm thinking I didn't get that part I'm I'm reading the chat right now. But before I get into that, I'll go back to the chat. There was also this argument about the arm weight. Oh my gosh, how many times did we talk about the arm weight, right? Brennan spent a lot of time on this testimony. And at times I thought, you know what, you're beating a dead horse. I hate that phrase, but I felt like he was just trying too hard to make this fit his narrative. Like, oh my gosh, why did you choose the wrong arm weight? Like, it was this, make or break moment. And I really didn't see it that way. And I don't know if the jury really caught on to it, but let's just hear what he has to say about it here.
You were asked on cross-examination several times about the weight of the hybrid 3 arm. Do you recall that series of questions?
Yes.
You were asked how much lighter the hybrid 3 arm was than the static estimate arm, correct?
Correct.
I want to make sure we're clear about this. The hybrid 3 arm is the physical arm that you attached to the ATD and did testing with, correct?
Correct.
The statistical estimate arm is something in the ether, right? It doesn't exist?
Sustained.
How would you describe a statistical estimate arm?
It's probably from taking a sample of the population and getting an average and a high and a low.
Okay. Is that a physical arm? You can touch and feel?
No.
Okay. Do you have any information based on everything that you've reviewed at all about the actual weight of John O'Keefe's right arm?
Remember, I made the comment, I'm like, what were they going to do? And I said, this is morbid, but what were they going to do? Cut his arm off and weigh it? It's theoretical. It's just a statistical estimate of what someone his size arm would weigh. It wasn't actually measured. It's just the percentage of weight difference that's calculated right through your whole body. Like, okay, what would an arm weigh? But Brendan just went on and on and on about it being 26% lighter. And now you have to skew all the numbers because you're showing everything at a higher speed, but really it should be this speed. It was a lot. And I thought that that the jury was getting lost. And people in the chat here when we were going over it were getting a little bit lost.
Nothing in terms of a weighed measurement of the arm, no.
What was the percentage that Mr. Brennan gave you in terms of how much lighter the hybrid 3 arm was than the statistical estimate arm that he gave you?
From what I
26.
recall, I think the percentage was 26%.
We heard it
Did you
so many
calculate
times.
that yourself, or did you take Mr. Brennan's word for it?
I believe I took his word for it.
I loved this part. No matter what side you're on, when you hear a good argument and you're like, okay, they did a good job on that.
Do you recall what the weight of the hybrid 3 arm was exactly?
9.38 pounds.
What is the difference, if you can calculate, what is the difference between what was the statistical estimate arm, the number that Mr. Brennan gave you?
I think I heard him say 11.8, but I also think he said at one point 11.6. So I'm not sure of the final number he landed on.
Does
Sustained. Ask the question and stop striking the answer.
does 11.86 sound right?
Yes,
Okay. Let's use 11.86. Do you have a calculator with you?
I do.
With the court's permission,
He has an emotional support calculator. Dr. Welcher had his emotional support laptop or 3.
could Dr. Wolfe use a calculator if he needs to?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then Brendan gets all up in arms about him using a calculator later. I think I did play that in
What's
here.
the difference between 11.86 and 9.38? Just in raw numbers?
2.4.
You're looking at just the difference between those two?
Subtract
Okay.
9.38.
2.48.
Does that mean there's a 2.48 pound differential between the statistical estimate arm, the heavier arm, and the 9.38 arm from the hybrid 3?
Yes, that's the
So we have it. 2.48 pound difference in arm weight. So would this have been materially affecting the outcome, especially given how much energy is imparted in this test? And the answer is no. But what's even more interesting was when they did a whole explanation of this. And look, it kind of went over my head. But when I listened like 2 or 3 times, I was like, okay, so he's going to walk the jury through solving the formula. He's going to use both arms, the 11.86 and the 9 point, what was it, 38? So he's going to get a mass. He's going to estimate, or he's going to give you the velocity, which is 24 miles per hour. And he's going to give you relative energy, which is the result. So let's have him do it.
Difference in pounds.
All right. How would you calculate how much lighter? What's the proper way to calculate how much lighter in terms of percentage the 9.38 arm is?
You would want to do a percent difference calculation.
Divide 2.48 by 11.86?
Sustained. Watch the form, Mr. Jackson.
How would you tell the jurors how you would calculate that percentage difference?
You would subtract the 11.86 minus the 9.38, and then you would divide by the sum of those two and divide by 2, the average of them.
Can you do that calculation?
Yes.
I got my new iPhone today. I'm so excited. I haven't had a new phone in so long. Like,
Okay.
so long.
And what's the number?
23%.
Not 26%?
So even the 26% was wrong. And he's like, I will defer to you. I trust you. It's like, no, you can't, because he did the math wrong.
Sustained.
Is 23% smaller or, not, or larger than 26%?
Sustained. Let's move on from that, Mr. Jackson.
Why couldn't he keep going? I was so confused. I was like, why does he have to move on from that? Because he's telling the truth. Brendan kept saying 26%. It was really 23. So I was like, why wasn't he allowed? He just puts his calculator down. He's
What
like,
is the number that you get if you were to divide 2.48 by 11.86?
0.21.
In percentages?
21%.
Thank you.
21.
Was the hybrid 3-arm 21% lighter by that calculation than the 11.86 estimate arm?
Yes.
Okay, it's coming. I know we're getting lost in the sauce a little. Just trust me, it's worth it at this point. Hi, Donna, by the way. And it has been going on a long time. She said, I can't get over how long this trial is going on for. I know. And think about this. There could be another mistrial. There could be another hung jury. Would you watch again? Let me know.
On cross-examination, Mr. Brennan asked you several questions related to kinetic energy formula.
This is important.
Correct.
This was like the bombshell for me. I was like, oh.
You referenced that did you reference that formula in some of your answers?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'm gonna like fast forward just a tad. Oh, what happened? Went to sidebar? I didn't know that. Come back.
You're looking at something that's been identified, a document that's been identified as 3 X's, XXX. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
With that, Your Honor, may we display the formula? Can we bring the light? Your Honor, is
Okay,
that
here's the formula.
Correct?
Correct.
You were asked a series of questions about whether the weight differential in the hybrid 3-arm would make a significant or material difference in your testing as it pertains to the velocity of the vehicle that you were testing. You remember those questions?
So watch the form again. Ask it differently, Mr.
Just foundationally, were you asked about weight differential of the hybrid 3-arm?
Yes.
Were you also asked about whether it would make a material difference to the testing if you didn't adjust for the velocity?
Sustained.
What were you asked in terms of, what was the question that was posed to you about the weight of the hybrid 3-arm?
Brennan was saying the weight difference made a difference, that he should have used the heavier arm. But just hear what happens.
Versus the velocity of the testing.
That there would somehow be an influence on, I think, wanting to make a reduction to the velocity of the vehicle.
Does that make mathematical sense to you?
Sustained is to that point.
Would that have a material difference with the weight of the arm, at 2.48 pounds? Would that have a material difference in the testing that you undertook?
No.
Why is that?
Well, to start, that's one of the reasons why we went above and beyond the 24 miles per hour to impart significantly more kinetic energy to the arm. So if you look at that equation, it's a quadratic equation because you're squaring the velocity. So if
Sir, what? Just kidding.
if you
Quadratic equation. I'm like, no, I checked out. But this is so important.
double the velocity, you quadruple the amount of kinetic energy. So you get a significant increase in small changes in speed because of that speed differential.
Did you do a test with just the hybrid arm contacting the tail light at 24 miles per hour?
Yes.
Did you also do a test with that hybrid 3-arm contacting the vehicle at 29 miles per hour?
That's why they did different tests, because they were trying to make up for that velocity. But here's what's interesting.
Yes.
I'd like to talk about those two tests. Okay? Can you explain to the jurors what they're looking at? I want to start with going from left to right. What does the E sub K mean in that formula?
So that stands for kinetic energy, which is the amount of energy that an object has when it's in motion and has a velocity to it.
What is the 1/2 on the other side of the equal sign?
Just a constant.
And what does the M, as in Mary, stand for?
So that would be the mass, in this case, the mass of the arm.
And what's the V, as in Victor?
That would be the velocity of the arm as it's accelerated.
Why is there an exponent at the top of the V?
Because you're squaring that. So you're basically multiplying the velocity times itself. So it would be velocity times velocity.
Is this a formula that's traditionally used in accident reconstruction?
Yes, it's very common.
Is it sort of one of the foundational formulas? When did you learn this formula?
Probably back in high school physics.
I'm going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, to walk the jurors through
Here.
a calculation dealing with the 24-mile-an-hour test using the 11.86-pound statistical arm as an assumption of the weight of the arm.
Okay.
You
Your Honor,
understand?
may I have a pen and paper to...
This is,
Right.
I
May
know
I
it's,
approach you on our-
Yes.
this is the only time I'm going to be playing it to the point of this is boring, but it's actually really interesting, because what he's going to do is he's going to do the math. Like I said, he's going to do it for both arms, the 11.86 and the 9.38. He's going to get the velocity, which is 24 miles per hour, and the mass, which is the pounds, right? And he's going to get those calculations, and it's going to result in the relative energy that was put out in these tests. And this is interesting.
I have a pad here too, if whatever's easiest.
Whatever's easiest.
I'm telling you, he'll make it make sense. I promise. And it's almost like one of those gotcha moments where you're like, oh my gosh, if Brennan would have had his way, it would actually help the defense's argument. So it's like, what?
If you assume the mass of 11.86, that's the statistical arm weight, and you assume the V for velocity is 24 in miles per hour. I don't care about the units, doctor. Just assume 11.86 and 24. Can you calculate this quadratic equation?
Yes.
What do you get? I want to do it step by step. What's the result of squaring 24?
So again, you're not concerned about the units?
I do not want to talk about units.
Just, okay.
If you mention the word joules, my head will explode.
That's, I didn't know if you wanted, Newton meters, foot pounds. Okay.
Stop it.
So
Immediately.
just 24 squared.
He was, not that these aren't humans, but when I say humanizing, it's like the rapport is there. He's hoping that'll transfer to the jury, that they're seeing him as someone funny and relatable. And Jackson does that really well. Brennan doesn't. So I'm just pointing this out because Brennan doesn't make me like any of the witnesses. It's like, I don't like them. And then he kind of bullies the other witnesses on the defense. So I'm like, how can I like Brennan if he keeps doing that? So I think there has to be a balance, especially when you want the jury to like you, because guess what? Odamaris said in the last live we were in, I think it was her, she said she was just on a jury, or it could have been someone else. Let me know. And the reason they were going to find the defendant guilty was because they didn't like the defense attorney. It can come down to that. They're not supposed to, but that matters.
Correct.
Is 576.
Do you always, in this calculation, do you always use the exponent first? Do you always do the square first?
Sustained.
What's the first thing that you do?
I'm going to go forward.
After you
Fly by the 11.
He's going to
How
do
many decimal
both.
places do you want? Nearest whole number?
2.
Okay. 6,831.36.
What's the next step once you get that number?
Okay, he's going to do the
Says we're not doing
numbers. You'll see why this.
15.68. Is that right?
Correct.
And that was at what mile per hour?
24.
Let's move to a different equation.
Okay.
Now I'd like you to presume different numbers.
So he just got the relative energy for the heavier one. And that was 3,415.68.
I don't know what the question is.
9.3.
And now he's going to do it for the lower one.
First thing you do in solving that equation.
So if you multiply by 9.38,
What's the number?
And this is going to be for 29 miles per hour. And the reason this matters is because I just told you they did two different tests, one for 24 and one for 29.
7,888.5,
And what's that final number?
3,944.29.
Okay, so I just want this to be clear because it's important. So the relative energy number, the result for the 11.86 arm, which is the one Brendan was like, oh, you should have been using that one. That was 3,415.68 relative energy, right? So just think 3,400. For the one that weighs less, the one that they actually used, the result was 3,944.29. So it had a higher relative energy. So the actual test with the lighter arm at a higher speed generated more energy than the theoretical 24 mile per hour test with a heavy arm. So remember, she was supposedly going 24 miles per hour. Brennan wants to make the arm heavier. The actual test with the lighter arm at that higher speed had more energy than the theoretical 24 mile per hour test with the heavier one. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense. The 29 mile per hour test, the lighter arm generated 14% more energy than the 24 mile per hour test with the heavier arm. So this is reinforcing the defense's point. Speed can compensate for the arm mass in generating the taillight damage. So it doesn't make a better argument for the Commonwealth if they use a lighter arm. That's the point.
That would be the number or the amount of energy imparted on the arm at 29. Is that right? 29 miles per hour?
So ask it differently.
Sure. What is that 3,944.29 number? What does that mean in terms of the kinetic energy?
That'd be the kinetic energy that the arm has if it were moving at 29 miles per hour and weighed 9.38 pounds.
One final calculation. What is the percentage difference between 39.44.29 and the other test that we just did, or the other calculation, 34.15.68?
So in terms of a percent difference, again, when you're subtracting the two and then dividing by the sum divided by 2, so that's basically the average of the sum, it is 14%.
14%
difference.
Which of the two tests, the two energy equations that you just did, which represents the higher kinetic energy imparted to the arm? The 24 mile an hour test, that's the hypothetical, or the actual test at 29 miles an hour? Which one?
The 29 mile per hour speed with the arm weight of 9.38.
What does that mean, Dr. Wolfe, in terms of the testing that you did with the lighter arm, 9.38 pound arm, at the 29 mile an hour test, as it compares to the hypothetical 24 mile an hour test?
It would be more force and more energy in the 29 mile per hour impact test.
Even though you used a lighter arm? Objection.
Sustained.
And what was your opinion and conclusion as it pertained to the subject taillight using the 29 mile an hour test? What was your opinion and conclusion as it pertains to the subject taillight? Was that consistent or inconsistent with the damage that you saw on the 29 mile an hour test?
It was inconsistent.
So that's what he talks about. The 29 mile per hour test still didn't match the taillight damage. So his ultimate conclusion, even at 29 miles per hour, so higher than what they're saying it was when Karen supposedly hit John O'Keefe, with significant kinetic energy, the test did not replicate the type of damage found on her Lexus. So what that means is the damage on her car was not consistent with hitting a human body. That's kind of what it boils down to, right? Those that are on, Karen Reed's side's not going to want to hear that, but this is science. This is what they're doing. This is physics. They're doing the numbers. They're crunching the numbers. And in summary, for this portion, the defense used this entire redirect to rehabilitate Dr. Wolfe's credibility. Because when we left off, he was being hammered by all these questions about the arm and why didn't you use it? And now you did it wrong. And, that could get in the jury's mind like, yeah, why didn't you use an arm that, was more his weight? The arm weight doesn't invalidate his results. And he explained why. He used the energy calculations. The test force was higher than what the prosecution claims. And it still failed to produce matching damage. So this still implies that John O'Keefe was not struck by a Karen Reed's SUV. That's just a wrap up of the defense's argument. But it was now time for Brennan to recross Dr. Wolfe. And the weight debate continues. I hate to say it. Don't worry, we won't. Oh, where am I going? This is not where I wanted to be. I don't know how she got in there. Uh-oh. So we're going to get back to this doctor here in a moment. But what I wanted to point out is we're going to hear from Brendan again. And yes, we do have to go through it just for a few because we have to be fair and show the arguments of both sides. Actually, it's important to do that because we have to understand what's going on and how they're going to refute each other's arguments.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Doctor, did you have a chance to speak to anybody from the defense this weekend?
Not over the weekend, no.
Here it goes again. Remember, he is going to continue hammering at this because remember, Dr. Russell, she said, oh, I took a limo with the defense. And they said, oh, you can ask for an exhibit. So now he's kind of hammering that home. Good point. I understand why he's doing it. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I don't know. I mean, let's just hear what he says. Did you talk to anyone from the defense this weekend?
After you left here Friday?
On Friday, I let them know that I was returning back home, and then I let them know last night that I had arrived, yes.
Did you receive any new information or have any conversation before you came in today?
No.
Now, when we asked you about weight last week, you did not go into any calculations about the difference between the standard arm, 11.86, and the 9.38, did you?
I don't believe we did, no.
In fact, when you testified last week, at the end of the day, you were asked questions by Attorney Jackson about the weight of that arm, correct?
Yes.
He was just asked questions about the weight of that arm.
And when you were asked about the weight of the arm, Attorney Jackson asked you if you were asked a lot of questions about the difference in the weight of the arm, about 11.8 pounds statistically as it relates to Mr. O'Keefe versus 9.4 pounds. Do you remember him asking you about
Didn't we just go over this?
that?
Yes.
And you were asked whether you were aware whether anybody had measured the weight of John O'Keefe's right arm.
Oh, I
And you
remember.
responded, I'm not aware of that, no. Remember that testimony?
Yes.
And then you were asked, when you asked questions about whether or not his arm was 11.8 pounds, are you aware of anybody ever just weighing just his arm? And you said no.
Correct.
And finally, you were asked, what is that based on, 11.8? Where did that come from? Remember what you said?
Yes.
I don't know. Remember you answered Attorney Jackson and you said, I don't know where that came from.
Right, referring to, I don't know what source you pulled that 11.8 from.
And so you were suggesting that that is just a number pulled out of thin air, right?
Assistant.
He actually didn't say that. I remember what he did say, but let him finish.
Was that a surprising estimate, 11.8 to you?
I don't know that it was surprising. I don't know what your source is for it.
Well, when you engage in accident reconstruction, you never just take somebody's limb and sever it and throw it on a scale, do you?
Okay, way to be morbid, but we talked about it.
I'm not usually doing that part of the analysis, no.
So when you're relying on body weight and different parts of the body, there is strong statistical studies that give you a guide, isn't there?
I would agree with that, yes.
Well, the numbers just aren't in thin air. If you're doing a study and you have to figure out damage to an arm or a foot or a leg, and you have to come to an estimated value or weight, you have to get that information from somewhere, don't you?
You would probably take their height and their weight, kind of like when you go on those websites and it's always wrong. It's always wrong. It's always wrong, but it'll say calculate your BMI and you'll put in your height and you'll put in weight. And it's like obese, like it doesn't matter. Even if it's like all muscle weight, it'll be like you're unhealthy and you're like, wait a minute, what? And it doesn't exactly test it as an exact science. And you're walking around going like, what do you mean? I don't understand. That's why you need one of those real scales. Like I have one at my house that you step on with like the metal and it will actually calculate the water in your body and give you an estimate on whatever. But my point is, usually there is a statistical mathematical equation. You can plug it in on a website and it'll be, they're not really usually doing it for like how much does my head weigh or how much does my arm weigh, but they do have that in these kind of experiments where you can kind of calculate, okay, if someone is 216 pounds and they're 6 feet tall, here's what their limbs probably weigh, but they don't really know the distribution between whether that's muscle, whether that's fat. They don't know that. And that is why this whole argument is a little skewed.
I would agree, yes.
Like, if you make it up out of thin air, you have to find a resource, a reliable, vetted resource. True?
I would agree.
And that's what you do.
In some instances, yes.
Well, in this case, you chose an arm that was 9.38 pounds. Where did you get the support that the 216-pound, 6'1" man would have an arm that weighs 9.38 pounds? Where did you get that from?
Well, it's conservative from the standpoint, if you think about one of the equations we talked about last week, force is equal to mass times acceleration. So if we take the acceleration data from our test and we multiply it by a lighter mass, the 9.38 pounds, it's less force to the arm. So now if you want to increase the mass of the arm, you're now talking about a greater net force to the arm. So it's conservative from a force perspective.
Put aside your story about the force perspective. My
Oh
specific
my gosh, put aside your story about force. That's what I mean. I don't feel like he has to do that because he's challenging the argument. So when people say like don't challenge the person, just challenge the argument or the belief or whatever. Like don't bully the person. I just feel like he kind of bullies the people. And that is one thing I'm always going to say about Brennan, and he did show a little bit of a softer side in this day. And we're going to get there.
Ask the question before you.
I'll ask you again, Doctor. Tell us where you got the 9.38-pound value from.
He's so silent. He's not at the podium, but he's asking, where did you get the 9.8-pound value from?
Considering a 6'1", 216-pound man, where did you get that from so you could be statistically accurate?
It is the mass of the hybrid 3-arm. We saw the photograph that depicted the weight. Again, how you account for that when you're doing the force calculations is you would utilize the acceleration data that we measured, and then you would apply a different mass, in this case, a heavier arm. And I will note, it's the same thing that Dr. Welcher did in his drop test with the hybrid 3 head. He ultimately measured the acceleration of the head, and then to calculate the force, he adjusted the mass of according to Mr. John O'Keefe's mass of his head.
See? So his point was like, wait a minute. Because Brennan was arguing that Dr. Wolfe ignored the 95th percentile that matched John O'Keefe's body, which was a heavier arm, right? The dummy itself, the arm itself, you didn't match it up. But Dr. Wolfe was like, wait a minute. Dr. Welcher did the same thing with the head calculation. But hold on, we're still getting there.
For the third time, I'm going to ask you just a very simple question.
Because there's a math breakdown on how Brennan got to 11.86 pounds.
Dumb it down for me if you can, okay, Doctor? Where did you get the source to legitimize using a 9.
Where'd you get the source to legitimize using a 9.38-pound arm?
6'1", 216 pounds. Where
I have the closed captioning for this reason.
say that arm is validated to use for that size man? Where is that?
Again, it's the weight of the ATD arm. That is what the 50th percentile arm weighs. As I mentioned, in our field, it's accepted to utilize the acceleration data, and then you adjust the force based upon an increase in mass.
Is that your answer?
Yes.
Mr. O'Keefe's body weight and size does not put him in the 50th percentile like the 9.38 arm. He's closer to the 95 percentile.
He argued this in the last day of trial as well.
Isn't that fair to say?
Correct.
And there is, in fact, the 95 percentile crash test dummy, isn't there?
There is, yes.
Yeah. You chose the 50 percentile, which is shorter, yes?
Correct.
Weighs less, yes?
Correct.
And the arm weighs less. True?
Correct.
The truth is, you have absolutely no study, no paper, no article that supports using a 9.38 arm for a 216-pound man who's 6'1". You have not one reference or study you can offer us right now, do you?
I don't agree with that, because again, if you look how Dr. Welcher did it, he used the 50th percentile in his drop test with the head, and to calculate the force, he adjusted for Mr. John O'Keefe's mass of the head. Same thing is done in this instance with the lighter arm.
Why is it okay for Dr. Welcher to do it, but it's not okay for Dr. Wolfe to do it when this is a standard way to do it? You just have to account for it.
Adjust for that in the calculations.
So you have one paper, one study. I know the answer to this, but let me ask. You have one paper, one study to support that it is appropriate to use the 50 percentile 9.38 arm for a person who is 6'1", 216 pounds. I won't ask you again, but if you can answer this once for me. Do you have one paper, one study?
So I'll take out the commentary. You went
Yeah, he does a lot of commentary. And you know what? The judge is fair most of the time, as long as there's an objection. And sometimes she'll catch it without it and she'll be like, no commentary, just questions.
to that, well, answer that question, please.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
You have one paper. Give me a name, an author. One paper, one study that supports
And Brennan really thought this was like the turning point. Like he got him.
using a 9.38 arm, 50th percentile, when you're doing a crash test for somebody who's in the 95th percentile who weighs 216 pounds and is 6'1". One paper, sir.
I don't have a paper because Dr. Rentschler is addressing the forces and the injuries to the arm.
You talked about, however, would you come up with the number 11.8? Like it was something that is curious or foreign to you, right?
Sustained.
Are you confused how the number 11.8 would come up?
I'm going to allow that.
I'm not confused. I don't know your source for it.
When you
I just wonder why Brennan keeps going around in circles. Like he just wants to know your source. Can't you just tell him? He's going to tell him, but he's asking like, he's acting like this is this big secret.
do studies, would you agree that the head has a similar weight to the arm and that the weight of an arm would be about 5.48% of a person's body weight?
I'm sure that there's various studies out there that talk about that could be one
This is the one I was telling you about. Like there are calculations out there you can do. You plug in your weight, you plug in your height.
particular study.
Well, let's talk about one study. What do you think? You're the engineer, you're the expert. When you're weighing an arm by percent, what is the percent of the arm of the total body weight?
I don't know as I sit here today off the top of my head, no.
I'm sorry?
I don't know as I sit here today off the top of my head.
Well, if you don't know the percent of body weight of the arm compared to the whole body, how would you ever come up with a number for the arm?
Well, from the work that I've done with Dr. Rentschler in this case dating back to last year, it's my understanding that his calculation for the arm was approximately 11 pounds.
So you're relying on somebody else's study? You're doing an independent assessment of the evidence, and you're relying on other people's math? Is that what you're telling us?
I don't agree with that because, as I've mentioned numerous times, Dr. Rentschler and I worked as a team on this case. You can't separate the reconstruction part from the biomechanical part.
And remember, Burgess and Welcher worked as a team. They did the same thing. So you just keep trying to drive this point home, and I think it was odd. But I will say, though, Wolfe tries to distance himself from the 11.8 figure. But you'll hear what happens.
It's an integral part
Sorry, I keep pausing. It's just like it's coming.
that works together on it.
Would you agree that the arm is about, statistically vetted, that it's 5.48% of the total body weight? Would you agree with that?
It sounds about right, but again, I
Okay.
don't have the percentage
So
off
if
the
you
top of my head.
take 5.48% of a 171-pound man, which is the crash test dummy you were using, the 50 percentile, what do you get?
You said 5.48%?
Yeah,
Just over 9 pounds,
okay. Close to 9.38?
9.37.
Okay, now when you have 216 pounds,
Exactly. It's a simple calculation, like I said.
5.48%,
11.8
11.8. Sound about right, doctor?
by that calculation, yes.
Okay. Now, you said you had some confusion where I'd get that number from, this 11.8. Do you remember
The big reveal.
that?
Yes.
Thanks for all the gifted memberships, everyone. Thank you so much.
And when I threw out that number, is that the first time you heard of that number?
The 11.8?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or 11, is that the first time you heard of it from anybody, 11 pounds? Is that a new number to you?
I don't understand your question.
Well, you're saying that when Attorney Jackson asked you, where did Brennan get those numbers from? You said,
Just
I don't
tell
know.
him.
Remember that on
Correct.
Friday? Do you know where I got the number 11 pounds from?
No, please tell us, Brennan. Tell us. We've been here for 15 minutes. Just tell us.
11.8
Yeah.
or 11?
11.
As
No,
I
it's
just
11.
mentioned, last year, I believe I testified in a previous proceeding that it was about 11 pounds.
Yes. Your testimony.
He already said that. He said, yeah. And you're not really necessarily supposed to be bringing up the previous trial unless there's a reason why you're trying, and what he's doing right now, trying to use it to, oh my gosh, discredit him and make him look like he's wrong. But really, he already mentioned that like 2 times.
11 pounds. Your prior testimony, right?
Yes,
You testified before under oath in this case, didn't you?
correct.
And when you testified under oath, and you were giving a general estimate about the pounds of Mr. O'Keefe's arm, based on your experience and your training, you said it was around 11 pounds. Those are your words, right?
Correct, yes.
Under oath,
Yes.
right? You can't delete something that's under oath, right?
Look at his smirk and his dimples. Look at his smirk. Oh, that should have been I have to screenshot that for later. You can't delete something under oath. It's like, oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make fun of Brendan, but sometimes those arguments make me laugh because it's like you're trying to wrap all the arguments in one. It's like, oh, you can't delete something under oath because he deleted the signal messages. Look at that smirk.
Sustained.
Okay. So I think I think we've totally gone above and beyond to prove this did not make a difference. I don't know why he had to challenge him so many times. It's more like a jab at him. I understand. I get it. This is a job. He's going to have to discredit the witnesses. But I think there are probably better arguments how he could do that. And he made a few good ones. And like I said, I'll always call it like it is. If I see a good argument, I'll say that's a good point. By the way, thank you so much for the super chat. Sassy says, "You're doing a wonderful job. How do I gift someone?" I have actually never gifted anybody before, but I know several people have gifted. And don't forget to turn gifting on so you can accept memberships. But the good news is if people are not here and someone gifts, next time people come on, the gifts will go out again. So I thought that was kind of cool. Okay, let's listen to this.
Body weight. So for someone who weighs 216 pounds, that comes out to about 10.8 pounds. Would you agree with that?
I haven't done the calculation, but if the math checks, then yes.
Okay. Would you agree with this statement? The heavier the object, if it gets hit center mass, that's going to be even greater force because that is more mass than just 11 pounds. So the acceleration is the same for each body part. It just depends on the weight of the body part and how heavy it is to determine the force that's actually exerted on the body. Do you agree with that?
I would be like, oh, you got to break that down. You got to break that down. I need sentence by sentence. I need to be like, okay, I didn't even hear what he said.
I'm going to allow the question.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, and I think I described that a little bit earlier. Is
And he caught it. I was like, how in the world?
you would increase the mass, you multiply it by the acceleration, that's going to increase your force. Force is equal to mass times acceleration.
Right. So mass has a direct correlation to force. You agree?
Correct.
So therefore, the heavier the object, if it's colliding at the same speed, will create more force than a lighter object. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Correct. More force on the arm. Yes.
Right. So weight matters, doesn't it, sir?
Yes.
Force is mass times acceleration. So if the arm weighs the same as the head, you're still going to get the same force. And so inevitably, you change the mass, you change the weight, same speed, it changes the amount of force.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
He just showed that. That was that whole. I understand that Brendan is writing notes when a witness is being questioned. I understand he has his own agenda, but I almost felt like, were you not listening to the equation that he just did to show you relative energy, how much force is being used? Like, we just did an entire equation.
When you did calculations in this case, you never took the estimate of 11 pounds, although it didn't exactly calculate the 5.48. You never took that 11 pounds and determined the percentage difference between the mass in that arm and the mass in a 9.38 pound arm, did you?
No, I did not.
You didn't include it in any of your PowerPoints.
No.
You didn't explain it to the jury that there's a difference in weight matters.
Again, that's something that Dr. Rentschler is going to discuss.
I'm asking you because you testified, you gave opinions, you got a PowerPoint. Did you explain to the jury about the difference in force when there's a change in weight? When you did all your PowerPoint and calculations, did you break it down for them?
Well, I think it was certainly stated. I mean, I know that we went over Newton's second law, force is equal to mass times acceleration, right? So if you
He expects it kind of be obvious because they did so many different tests and they made up for it. But he's trying to show, oh, you didn't put it in your slide. You didn't show that. And he's like, no. And he relied on speed increases to account for the weight difference. We just saw that. He increased it to 29 miles per hour to make up for that and show even above and beyond what they said Karen was going, right? Again, I know he's doing his job, but sometimes I just want to pull my hair out.
you increase that mass number, it will increase the force.
When you were putting up your PowerPoints with the speeds, did you explain to us that there's a difference when you change the mass so that if you used a lighter arm, there would be a difference in force? Did you explain that to us in any of your slides?
I don't know that I explicitly stated it, but again, that's why we went up to 29 miles per hour to account for that difference in weight.
Were you
Right.
trying to inflate the force for the speed of test so it looked like the collision had to happen at a faster speed to cause a certain amount of damage? Were you doing that intentionally?
No.
Good point, though. I mean, that's a good argument. That's what I mean. It's a good argument. It can definitely get in the jury's head like, wait a minute, did you try to show a faster speed because you wanted the jury to say, oh, look, it had to be faster. And he's like, no, I was making up for the weight differences. Okay, let's go to the fabric because this is going to become very important. I don't want to do too many spoilers, but I do want to get into the next section or else we will be here all night, which is sometimes fun, but we're going to get into the fabric.
Have any support on Friday? Do you have any today that you can refer to?
No.
Wait, I
You
missed a
should
little bit of
use
that.
vetted journals, learn treatise, any support whatsoever about whether you should use a crash test dummy arm for these types of studies. You didn't have any support on Friday. Do you have any today that you can refer to?
No.
Putting aside the fact that you have absolutely no professional studies or journals to support that you should be using a crash test dummy's arm for these type of tests, are you aware of the expert literature in this case that the opposite, you specifically should not use crash test dummies?
He's saying, do you know that there is literature that says you should not use crash test
You're
dummies
trying to do this type of analysis on clothing
when you're trying to do this type of analysis on clothing and a person's body?
whether that exists.
I'm not aware of those studies, no.
As a inquisitive engineer, wouldn't you want to know if there was legitimate studies in your world, in your profession, that suggests or states that you should not be using crash test dummies to determine injury to the arm as far as lacerations? Would you want to know that?
I think, again, you're getting confused between my role and Dr. Renfro. Can I finish, please?
No.
Oh my gosh. And he's like, can I finish, please? And you know what? Somebody made this point. He acts more like a defense attorney when he's supposed to be a prosecutor. But remember, he is a defense attorney. That's what he does. He's a special prosecutor in this case. So I agree. He does. I don't know if he's doing it on purpose. I don't know if it's just ingrained in him at this point. But he's like, can I finish, please? No. Yes, he has a right to finish his thought. And usually the judge will catch that.
Okay, so, no comment, Mr. Brennan. Answer the question.
Yeah, she's letting him answer.
I wasn't addressing the lacerations or the abrasions to the arm, sir.
You had photographs and you were opining that you would have expected or you would not expect there to be abrasions or cuts on that clothing in your test A and B, didn't you?
There were no holes or cuts in the material, no.
I understand, but you offered opinions. Didn't you offer to the jury an opinion that the abrasions on Mr. O'Keefe's arm were inconsistent with your tests in A and B?
The cuts and the holes are inconsistent.
Sir, when you are assessing cuts and holes on clothing, you need to make sure the predicate as a basis that you're using the right properties, right?
I thought this was a good argument, and we all said this last time, like all of us, but it was going back and forth in the chat. For those of you that weren't here, we talked about how skin is much different on a human body than on a mannequin or on a test dummy. I mean, now he did call it something, and I can't remember what it is, but it's like a synthetic skin that they use that is of a material that's softer, so it isn't as hard as maybe what we would have imagined. So think of maybe it as like one of those real baby dolls. Remember those from the 90s? I wanted one so bad. But it has a little bit of elasticity in the mannequin. But still, I think this is a good argument. I think the jury could look at it like, yeah, how can you really show what would happen to an arm when it's not a human arm? It doesn't have the same bounce or, elasticity. It's a good point.
I would agree with that.
And so if there was literature
He said, I agree with that. So let me go
Directing
back
agree
really
with
quick.
as a basis that you're using the right properties, right?
Got to use the right
I would agree
properties.
with that.
And so if there was literature directing that you should not use a crash test dummy to assess injury on an arm, would you follow that instruction or would you do it anyways?
Again, you keep saying injury to the arm. I was looking at what happens to the material when it makes contact with the tail light.
A crash test dummy's arm is harder than a human arm, isn't it?
Yes.
You push a human arm, it's like an indent. You can push in, can't you?
Yes.
And that property of pushing in, if a cloth is on it, it is easier for a cloth to tear pushing in than if it's hard, isn't it?
I don't know that I agree with that.
Well, do you disagree with that?
Well, the hybrid arm is of vinyl flesh, so it's not rigid.
Do you disagree with what
Vinyl flesh. That's what he called it, vinyl flesh.
I just said?
Can you repeat your question?
Sure. Human arm, softer than the hybrid, yes?
Yes.
When you push it, you can push in, much different than the hybrid arm, which is stiffer, yes?
I don't know what you mean by much different, but there will be a difference, yes.
Well, is it a noticeable difference to you if you push a hybrid arm as opposed to a human arm?
Yes.
When you push a human arm, it indents, yes?
Correct.
And so if you push with cloth on, the cloth indents, yes?
Correct.
Which creates an easier, tear in the fabric with less force if you can push in as opposed to a hard arm. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I would agree with that.
So when you're replicating studies and giving opinions about a person's arm, a real person's arm, using a hybrid arm doesn't seem to be an appropriate standard, does it?
I don't agree with that because, again, when the taillight breaks in the test, the arm is now moving with that taillight. So it's, again, like we talked about on Friday, you'd somehow have to have those fragments accelerating at a greater velocity to penetrate that.
We're going to get to that, but I'm talking about the stiffness. Let's get back to the appropriate.
Oh, we're going to get there. We're going to get there, but we're still talking about the stiffness of the arm. And he's agreeing. He's saying, yeah, you should use the right parameters. You should use the right properties, things that are going to affect durability, the material, how it reacts. And Wolfe admits there's no studies, no fabric research. This is the first test of its kind that he's conducted this way. So I can see how a jury could be like, yeah, you know what? You didn't conduct crash tests to assess these fabric tears before. I think that's a good argument.
Appropriateness of using a crash test dummy. Now conceding that a human that pushes different than the crash test dummy, would you agree that a crash test dummy is not an appropriate tool to use when determining tears in clothing on somebody's arm? Would you agree?
I don't think I would agree with that, no.
When you used the crash test dummy in test A and B, that was the 5'9" dummy?
Yes.
When you considered tears to clothing, you bought a new sweatshirt that was similar to Mr. O'Keefe's, an extra large sweatshirt?
Don't know if I recall the exact size, but I think one of them might have been extra large.
And then you bought a second one that was medium. So when you used the smaller dummy, you weren't actually using Mr. O'Keefe's size of extra large. You used a medium sweatshirt, yes?
Yes.
Because it was a smaller dummy than the size of Mr. O'Keefe. That's why you needed a smaller sweatshirt, yes?
I think it was more or less just what we could get our hands on.
So again, this is a good argument by Brennan. I'm just pointing out what the jury could see. And the reason I'm saying it's a good argument is because this is not going to affect anything. It really is not. I mean, it could look that way, but remember, it's almost like throwing all the spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. He's going to be like, oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? I have to impeach you because you should have used this larger size shirt. Maybe the shirt was older. Maybe the shirt was, and again, we're going to get into this in just a moment, but it wouldn't have made a difference because their theory is that somehow, and like, I'm going to show you full on, somehow, arm, might not be using the right one, but arm, right? That somehow all those fragments that came off, those bigger ones, flew into the arm and was able to penetrate the arm right after it got hit, because when else would it happen? And what he's going to explain is they would be moving at the same speed. So it's almost as though when those old cartoons, I think it was the Roadrunner, where the bullet would like come back and hit him because it's a cartoon. That's what I thought of, because I was like, yeah, it can't. If it's going at the same speed, how does it speed up and jab into his skin and stick in there? So he's going to get to that. But you can tell this is just another way to make the jury think about things. I'm not saying that they're bad arguments. I think they're good arguments because they make the jury think. Anything that's going to make the jury think is important. He's also going to talk about how, and I thought of this too. So I was like, oh, Brendan's thinking about this. Maybe he's even watching people's videos. Who knows? I mean, not ours, but I'm saying it's been said in other people's. The dummy was restrained. So it's limited in where it would go. We weren't able to really see. And I said that. I was like, what would have happened if it wasn't hanging from a forklift? Like, what would it have done? And so he's going to bring that up. If the dummy wasn't restrained, the broken taillight could have continued pushing against the arm. So let's listen to that.
A vehicle collides with a pedestrian, there's continued movement between the vehicle and the pedestrian, isn't there?
Correct.
And so while or plastic that shatters from a taillight might not impale clothes or the skin, would you agree, if your dummy wasn't restrained, when the Lexus collides with the dummy, there'd be continued contact for some time, extended contact between both the dummy and the taillight?
Well, the arm, as is demonstrated in the test, would be moving at roughly the same velocity as the vehicle.
Yes. And don't you think that the vehicle would continue to drag the arm until the body either was thrown or spun off? Would you agree with that?
At some point, they will separate, yes.
At some point, but before the at some point, what I'm asking is, at the collision, when you see all the taillights shatter, right, wouldn't the Lexus, if it continues at that speed, say 24 miles per hour, for example, it would continue to drag with that dummy's arm longer than is shown in those experiments because the dummy is restrained.
Courtney and I talked about this and our theory, but it doesn't add up because we're thinking like, how could this have happened if it was her hitting him, right? And we thought of all different scenarios, as I'm sure you have as well. And I was thinking, sometimes people block force. Like if someone's going to hit you, you might put your arm up like that to like shield your head because we're always trying to protect our head. So I was thinking, what if he saw the car coming and he put his arm up to brace himself, but he also pushed against the car? He's a big guy. He's not a small guy. I mean, he's what, 6'1", 216 pounds. I was thinking, what if he pushed up against the car and it shattered the taillight and then it cut him from pushing up against the car? So you can't see my arm, but like this motion, because the scrapes. So I was like, yeah, what if it shattered and then he like was still pushing and then he gets thrown? That's the only way it slightly made sense to me until I started hearing more of this and I was like, nah, it don't make sense.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Would you agree that if a Lexus is backed up at 24 miles per hour,
He said if the Lexus backed up 24 miles per hour and hits the dummy's arm
and the taillight shatters,
and the taillight shatters
if the dummy wasn't restrained,
and the dummy wasn't restrained and moved regularly,
the contact between that shattered taillight and
it would extend the contact. So they're stopping it. So he's saying, well, if you let it go, it would continue moving.
the dummy's arm. Would you agree with that?
It would move with the vehicle until it got pushed out of the way, just move to the side,
And
yes.
so what you're saying is it would move with the vehicle but wouldn't touch the vehicle?
Well, in the one test, if you remember, because of the restitution effects, the arm reached a speed of over what the impact speed is. So in some instances, it actually might move at a speed greater than the vehicle.
Fantastic. In some instances, would it move slower and be dragged by the vehicle's broken taillight?
Dragged?
Yeah,
I don't know
so
if I
when say
understand.
drag, push. How about we use the word push? Pushed by the broken taillight.
But then wouldn't John O'Keefe's body be underneath the vehicle? Because that's what I imagine when you say dragged or you say pushed. I can't get it in my brain that this would make sense, but maybe one of you can.
Would that happen?
The arm would move with the taillight until it moves out of the way.
So you're saying it would move with or faster, but never would slow down where it gets pushed by the car?
How would it
moving
slow down?
with the vehicle, sir. I don't understand your question.
Well, no. You said it moved with the vehicle. Sometimes it moves even faster, suggesting space between the broken taillight and the arm. That's what you're suggesting, right?
Correct.
So it can move with, it can move faster. Can it ever move slower and the vehicle pushes and drags against the arm?
I mean, it might be able to move a few miles per hour if it doesn't have as much of a center of mass hit, but it's still going to move out of the way because it's on a joint.
I understand, but before it moves out of the way, could it be pushed by that broken taillight? That's the simple question I'm asking you.
Why doesn't he stand at the podium? I don't understand.
By the broken taillight.
Just moving adjacent with the taillight, just moving along. Yes.
Brennan's face right here is like, move along. It's like, yes, the car is still going to move. And so is the body. The body's going to go somewhere. If this is the scenario, it's going to go somewhere. It's going to either fly up, it's going to go under. And we know those injuries didn't match anyway. So this is, to me, I was confused. And that was the end of that. I think some of the jurors may have been convinced that, yeah, if it wasn't restrained, it could have gone farther. But now we're going to talk about the taillight fragments. I thought this was good to point out, but again, do you remember how small these were?
And when Randy went for a ride, you didn't expect him to break off the string and slide across the street, did you?
We didn't expect him to.
You didn't expect him to be thrown. You didn't expect the string on the forklift to break and then Randy to go flying. You didn't expect that, did you?
Oh, I certainly expected that.
So you expected a throw with that.
Yes.
And the street has hard concrete and has a lot of irregularities to it, doesn't it?
It's asphalt, yes.
Yeah. And the photos that you were shown today on redirect examination, did the defense show them to you during your direct examination? Any of those?
No.
Ms. Gilman, can you pull up that last exhibit with Randy on the ground? I think it's exhibit 221.
I think this is the part I was trying to get to.
And so this is Randy, right, doctor?
Yes.
Zoom in a little bit, please. What's that red thing near his shoe?
Appears to be a fragment of the taillight.
Can you zoom out? Could you go back an exhibit to the one before? Could you zoom in? Did you see any taillight fragments on his body or in his clothes?
I don't know.
I can't tell from here.
Could we have the exhibit before, please?
Go and zoom in.
Can you tell from here?
Oh, right.
Yes.
Okay. Do you see the taillight fragment?
And finding taillight fragments on the clothes after a collision, that's not unique, is it?
Unique? No,
Yeah.
it's possible.
Well, according to this, it's probable, yes?
In this test that did occur, yes.
Could we have exhibit 201D, please?
So I thought this was another good argument by Brennan. Now, I think it's going to be challenged, but the fact that the jury saw a piece of debris on a dummy body, that you saw the shattered taillight in that accident test. So what I thought was interesting here is like, could there be in one juror's mind, right, if this were a human, that could have impaled them. It could have embedded inside the arm. Sure. I'm sure somebody on the jury is thinking that.
Do you know what this is, doctor? Did you see this picture in your analysis?
Don't know if I recall that specific photograph.
Do you know this is taillight shards found in Mr. O'Keefe's clothing?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you consider this photograph during your analysis before you gave your opinions regarding cuts and tears and lacerations?
No, sir.
So this is a taillight fragment that was on John O'Keefe's clothing. But look at the way he's showing it. I just want to point these things out because this is interesting. This is a good way to get your perspective in and have the jury see things a certain way.
Can you take that down, please? When you did your analysis, did you know that a drinking straw was found on the concrete on the street in front of 34 Fairview?
I don't know if it was on the concrete, it might have been on the asphalt, but I do recall a drinking straw, yes.
Did you know that there was a glass found near Mr. O'Keefe? Could you put that up, please?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you talked about cuts and injuries. Did you?
Objection.
Sustained. It sounds like it's beyond the scope.
Very well.
So that didn't fly. I'm going to end it right here. But what I was going to say is this supports the whole debris that we saw inside the bag. Remember that whole thing? But what I wanted to point out is he just blew up a microscopic piece of tail fragment, but didn't it look taillight fragment, not tail fragment, taillight fragment, but didn't it look big? I mean, I could tell there were like little fabric and it was under a microscope, but to a juror, and he's like, he ripped it down. He didn't explain anything. He didn't say this was like zoomed in 100%. He didn't say anything like that. He just was like, you see this fragment? You see it's inside there? Again, I think it's interesting, but what was really interesting about this day, and we don't have too much more to go through. I got really good highlights to put it up here. We get into the hoodie, and we're going to see something that we've never been shown before. And I don't want to be a spoiler, but this will become a huge issue. And some of you have already mentioned it, and that is fine. But we are going to take a look at some of the holes in the hoodie.
When you did test D
Nope, not that one. Wait. Yep.
on the exemplar vehicle, photo 77,
Objection.
Beyond the scope is the
It's coming up.
in Randy's sweatshirt from test F. You remember that?
Yes.
And you talked about what you would or wouldn't expect in a collision as far as holes. And did you say something like that was inconsistent with Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
That's what you said on redirect, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you consider whether there were holes in Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt separate from the holes in the arm?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. When you were making that opinion about consistent or inconsistent, did you ever consider whether there were holes in Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt other
Did he ever consider there were holes in Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt other than on the arm? And we've never been told anything about that, and there's a reason.
than the right arm.
Well, I know that there was cutting to the.
May I approach and retrieve the
And he just pointed out, well, I know there was cutting.
arm?
Yes.
And do you see what's right beside this witness? It's the glass with the hoodie inside.
Did you ever look at the back of the sweatshirt to see if there's any holes
He said, did you ever look at the back of the sweatshirt to see if there were any holes?
to the back of the sweatshirt other than the right arm and form your opinion?
I don't recall.
Take a look at the back. Do you see other holes on the back of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
It appears I see one hole.
Let me get a little closer so you can get a better look. I'll direct you to here.
I was really mad when I saw this because I already knew. I was really mad. And I only knew this because we've been doing these recaps. Like, we already talked about the cuttings and the DNA tests and whatnot. We already knew because we listened to Hartnett. We listened to that whole testimony. So I already knew that this was not okay.
Do you see more than one hole in the back of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
Yes.
So now he got him to agree that he sees holes in the back of John O'Keefe's sweatshirt, something that he didn't know about.
When you were forming your opinions that the collision would be inconsistent to damage to Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt, did you consider that Mr. O'Keefe may have fallen or landed on his back?
Well, in looking at those holes, they're inconsistent with road rash. And again, to get those kind of holes, you have to have prolonged sliding contact on a rough surface.
Did you consider that Mr. O'Keefe may have fallen or landed on his back?
Well, if you just fall and land on your back, you're not going to be sliding to get those abrasions and tearing. And again, those are not consistent with road rash.
Didn't ask that question. Did you consider?
I'm sorry, can you?
Did you consider whether Mr. O'Keefe had fallen or landed on his back?
No.
What's interesting about this is that they have that grass stain on the back of his jeans. So there is a theory that the grass was sharp and it's what caused the holes, and that he slid across the hard grass after being hit. Anyway, I don't necessarily want to tell you what's going on here because some of you haven't seen this part. So you're asking questions, which is totally fine, which you should, which I'm sure the jury was thinking about, which was not good. But these were not holes from this accident. They were from a criminologist. A criminalist. She took cuttings. These were not related to the accident whatsoever. So no, these are not supposed to come in as evidence. They weren't even supposed to be talked about.
Did you know about or consider the multiple holes on the back of his sweatshirt when you came and formulated your opinions?
No.
You did no studies whatsoever about the damage to the sweatshirt if he fell or landed on the cold, hard ground and had broken taillight shards in his clothing, did you?
No.
So this was huge. This was huge until, like my thumbnail said, there was a motion for a mistrial. And we're going to get there because the defense isn't going to come out with that right this second. They're building their case behind the scenes. They know this happened. And once it did, it opened up the opportunity for them to argue that there should be a mistrial. So we'll get there. But Jackson is going to come back again. And now we're going to be talking. There's been so many of these. This is redirect, right? There's so many back and forth. But he's going to call out the criticism, the inconsistency. Dr. Wolfe is reminded that Dr. Judson Welcher, the prosecution's expert, also used the 50th percentile. We already talked about that with the dummy in his own drop test. So, of course, Wolfe is going to confirm that's what he did, which he already argued on cross. But Dr. Wolfe is reminded that Dr. Judson Welcher did it first, the same exact type of experiment where he made a fur. We already talked about it, but I just want to play it. I agree. Salt. This was so dirty by Brennan. It was.
You were asked by Mr. Brennan, give me one name, very dramatically, of someone,
The objection sustained.
Objection, but
asking me-
he did the same thing.
one name to support using a 50 percentile hybrid 3 in testing forces on a 216-pound man. Do you remember that question?
Yes.
How about the name Judson Welcher?
Now that was good. That was good. I've got to give it to him.
How about that name?
So the objection sustained.
Did Judson Welcher use a 50 percentile hybrid in his drop test?
So that's sustained as to form.
What did Judson Welcher use in his drop test?
Yeah, that was leading, but it's argumentative in a way because he's trying to show the jury's still going to hear it. He knows that this is a tactic. I don't always like it because it is kind of, I want to say unfair. You're supposed to play by the rules. You're supposed to not ask leading questions, but it was out there. The jury heard it, but he's going to ask it a different way.
A hybrid 3 50th percentile male, the same that we use in our testing.
You were also asked whether or not using that hybrid 3 arm with the same speed would have an effect on the force equation, on the force calculation, correct?
Correct.
And you agreed it might have a small effect on the force calculation, correct?
So sustained as to form.
This is just foundational, Your Honor.
Sustained as to form.
How did you answer that question?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Let me ask it this way. In the 29-mile-an-hour test with the hybrid 3 arm, were you going faster than 24 miles an hour?
Yes.
And what was the calculation again on the increased force that would be exerted on the taillight, on the arm area of the taillight?
14% more?
Yes.
So
Sorry, I'm
sustained.
not trying
How
to
much- what
answer.
was the
But I
percentage?
remember we just talked about it.
That you calculated, the increase.
14%.
And did you find damage, even with the increase of 14%? Did you find damage on that exemplar taillight consistent with the extensive damage on the subject SUV?
I'll allow it.
No.
That was the point. The damage wasn't the same. Even when they increased the speed from 24 to 29, they did not see the same damage. Now I think this is very important. We're going to get into those plastic shards. Now, if you only watch one side, because some people do that, they're like, you know what? I don't want to watch the defense. I hate them. I'm not going to listen to anything they say. I think Karen is completely guilty. Then I'm like, but you have to, because it's almost like if you were watching a tennis match and you only watched from one screen and you only see the person like hitting the ball every time. Like you're not really seeing this, what happens next, what they come back with. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that you have to watch both, and this is why. And what's with my internet?
Mr. Brennan just asked you if you made note of these little red pieces, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any idea the size of those pieces? As you sit here.
Because it's blown up to like 500 plus.
Not without a scale of some sort, no.
So as you sit here, do you have any idea what the size of those pieces are?
I couldn't tell you as I sit here today, no.
No idea if they're a foot long?
So the objection sustained.
You were asked, when shown this picture, if you accounted for this in terms of damage to the garment, the sweatshirt, right?
Correct.
What if I told you those were
So the objection's sustained.
Oh, right when he was going to get into the oomph.
He said he doesn't know the sizes. That's the end of that.
She ended it. She's like, oh, he doesn't know the sizes. He doesn't know the sizes. So that's it. Which means the jury can still have it in their head. Look, that matches what we saw on the dummy.
I realize he said he doesn't know. He was
That's
asked
the
questions.
end
Your
of
Honor.
that, Mr.
And I was shocked. I have to say, I try to be fair to the judge because I'm like, you know what? It's fine. She's trying. But sometimes I see what people are saying. I'm like, what? Why can't he talk about this?
Do you have Mr. Wolfe, do you have the picture of the tin?
The tin. Okay, so he's trying to get it in somehow. He's like, okay, how can I creatively get this in?
The TIN, tin, the little round tin?
Because they're inside a tin. That's where they're being housed. That's how small
You see
they
that
are.
tin?
Yes.
Are you aware that all those pieces are inside that tin?
Sustained. And jurors disregard that.
Okay, the jurors are gonna disregard that, but they're in that tin. Look at the ruler. Look at the ruler.
Did you ever see this, Tim, in your analysis?
I do recall seeing, yes, in the evidence photographs of all the fragments, yes.
In your experience, are very large pieces or very small pieces put in little tins about 2 inches wide?
Sustained.
There's like no way for him to get this in. He's trying to ask it every which way. He's like, in your experience, how big are plastic pieces that are in a 2-inch wide container?
You were asked a question about the arm being pushed by the taillight.
Oh, yeah, this is my other point. So you understood that, right? Of course you did, because it's like, wow, he tried to pull a fast one. I'm talking about Brennan. So these are microscopic. I mean, they're tiny. That was a 2-inch wide tin that the shards are in. So how could that put punctures to clothing or an arm or both? It doesn't really add up.
Correct.
And that's why you have to watch both.
You indicated, what did you say in terms of the contact by a vehicle pushing an arm?
It's going to move with the vehicle until it separates.
Okay. In your testing, how long did it take the hybrid 3 arm to get up to speed of the vehicle in the 24-mile-an-hour test?
About 10 milliseconds.
10 milliseconds. In his 24-mile-per-hour test, the dummy's arm reached the vehicle speed in 10 milliseconds. So this short duration matters because it limits the amount of time that the taillight fragment, any taillight fragments, could have been pushing or what the other word, dragging on the arm, like Brennan was trying to put into the perspective of the jurors.
I'm sorry, say that again. About
10 milliseconds.
10 milliseconds, correct?
Correct.
So when you say the arm is being pushed, it's being hit, correct?
The ejection sustained and struck.
In every one of your tests, every single one of your tests, did any taillight fragment tear a hole in the sleeve of the shirt that you were testing?
No, there was no holes, punctures, fraying, nothing to the material.
Was there ever a defect in that garment in any of that testing other than the road rash that we saw in the 29-mile-an-hour direct impact?
That the only test that showed the holes and the abrasions was that full-on hit where the body was sliding on the ground. There was no test where the taillight caused any type of punctures, holes, or fraying to the material.
And in that test, what happened to the back of the Lexus, the test Lexus?
Destroyed.
Right. So I saw something in the comments I want to talk about too, but in all of his tests, there was no holes, no defects. The only visible garment damage came from the 29-mile-per-hour full body impact. And when the dummy was thrown, he slid across the pavement, causing those holes and the abrasions and things like that, well, to the dummy skin. And also, did you see the rear of that Lexus at the time? It was, in his words, destroyed. I wouldn't have said destroyed. I don't think it was destroyed, but it was definitely indented. It was definitely dented. It was definitely more than we saw in the one that Karen owned. And I think there's one more clip I wanted to show. Let's see. Let's go back here. I don't know where they went up. Oh, here we go.
On redirect, you again talked about...
Right. We've got Brennan again. Before we did that, I wanted to summarize. So we have Wolfe's use of the 50th percentile dummy, which was consistent with the expert Dr. Welcher. He used the same one. There was no holes or fabric tears by the taillight fragments in any test he did. And the only damage appeared on that full body impact scenario where the dummy slid. So I think that's important. Also, the taillight shards that were small being stored in a 2-inch tin, not likely to cause deep puncture injuries. But I'm going to say they're actually not deep puncture injuries, just to be fair. They're abrasions. They're not even really lacerations. And we're going to talk about that in further testimony. Let's just say that. But even with increased force, the crash that Wolfe did on the test that he did on the dummies did not create the same damage on Karen's Lexus. Well, guess what? Brendan's back. Brendan's back. Back again.
The impact between an arm and the broken taillight.
Correct, yes.
And I had asked you on cross-examination or recross-examination whether that broken taillight could push the arm, which of course would create force or friction, yes?
Well, once it's moving at a common velocity, I'm just not understanding your question then.
If it's not a common velocity, if the broken tail light is,
Ask the question.
if the broken tail light is pushing the arm, which would mean the broken tail light is going at a faster speed than the arm. If it pushes the arm,
What?
the broken tail light can come in contact with the arm, can it?
I didn't understand this. Explain it to me like I'm a fifth grader. He's saying if the taillight is going faster, it will push on the arm.
It's moving with the arm, sir.
That's why I'm confused. I'm like, what?
Okay, let me ask you this. Would you agree with this? If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles per hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, especially if there's a tail light that shatters. So if you have the tail light coming in, it's hitting the arm, it's moving forward into the arm. You agree with that?
Where is he reading
Dr.
that
Rensler.
from?
Do you agree with that?
No, he called him Dr. Rentschler, I think.
Dr. Rensler. Do you agree with that?
So
He's like, no, I'm Dr. Wolfe.
I'm going to allow it, strike the source.
Do you agree with that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
I can. If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles per hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, specifically if there's a taillight that shatters, so you have the taillight coming in, it's hitting the arm, and it's moving forward into the arm. Would you agree with that?
I don't understand his question.
I'm going to allow it.
I need to go back. What? This is what it says. If you have an arm, am I missing
Arm
something?
that's actually struck at 25 miles
If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles per
per
hour,
hour, you're going to have significantly greater
you're going to have significantly greater damage.
Specifically if there's a taillight that shatters,
Specifically if there's a taillight that shatters.
so you have the taillight coming in,
So you have the taillight coming in.
it's hitting the arm, and it's moving forward into the
It's hitting the arm and it's moving forward into the arm.
arm. Would you agree with that?
I'm going to allow it.
In reference to the greater damage, we talk about damage to the arm.
Do you agree with that phrase?
It's like, how can we agree with that phrase? I don't understand the phrase. It's moving. Okay, I don't understand.
The best way I can characterize it is it's moving with the arm, sir.
So if that actually caused fracture of the taillight, then parts of the taillight are going to be pushed into the arm and likely embedded into the arm as the vehicle continues forward and pushes the arm out of the way. Do you agree with that?
I'm going to allow it.
This doesn't make sense because in my mind, I'm seeing the fragments and they're going and the person's going. So how would they, wouldn't they just both go and then land? He was like, I need a sidebar. I remember that. He's like, I need to approach. He needed to, so we're going to come back. But I feel like we came back and it was the same question. I could be wrong.
I'm going to read this one more time, okay?
You see, he's reading it from somewhere. I want to know where he's reading that from.
Okay.
That must be Dr. Welcher's report.
Would you agree? If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles per hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, especially if there's a taillight that shatters. So you have the taillight coming in, it's hitting the arm, and it's moving.
Oh, I know what this is from. Context. Okay. Remember when Dr. Welcher was standing at the back of the Smurf vehicle, the Smurf paint, and it was going 2 miles an hour and his arm was being like pushed out of the way? He said, if you have an arm
Actually struck at 25 miles
that's actually struck at 25 miles an hour, because he's showing the difference. Like, okay, this was 2 miles an hour, but if you actually had one struck at 25 miles an
per
hour,
hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, especially if there's a taillight that shatters. So you have the taillight coming in, it's hitting the arm, and it's moving forward into the arm. So if that actually caused fracture of the taillight, then parts of the taillight are going to be pushed into the arm and likely embedded into the arm as the vehicle continues forward and pushes the arm out of the way.
oh my gosh. What? What is is that?
Would you agree with that?
Again,
Sir, they're going at the same velocity. They're moving, the arm is moving with it. The flea is moving with the dog. Like, I don't understand this.
my area of expertise is not injuries to the arm, so whether or not those fragments would be embedded or cause any type of damage to the arm, no. But what I would say is that I would agree with the taillight being pushed into the arm. It's going to cause the taillight to fracture, and then the arm will move with the taillight.
When you do a demonstration, isn't this exactly what you see? Could you play E again for me? Isn't this exactly what you see?
Play it, because I want to see it. We only have
Play that,
4
please.
more clips. So please, I would like to see this. This is the one I'm talking about. This was the one where my jaw dropped in the beginning because I'm like, what? It actually shattered? So let's think of it while we're doing this. If you have an arm that's actually being hit at 25 miles per hour, and this was the 29 mile per hour one, if I'm not mistaken, then you're going to see significantly more damage if the taillight was shattered and the arm caused, I'm trying to remember his phrase, and the arm caused the taillight to shatter because the taillight is going to move into the arm as the car pushes the arm out of the way. I don't know. Okay, so we've got the shatter. But they would both move.
And now, stop please. If Randy is not restrained by a forklift, he is going to move with the car, correct?
Oh wait, this is the 24 mile an hour one, no?
Well, if it's just the arm, his arm's going to get accelerated to move, and then his body will be there still.
And that broken taillight, if Randy is not restrained on a forklift, is going to be pushed, like it says, by the arm, by the broken taillight, isn't it?
It's going to move with the arm.
Thank you.
It didn't get anywhere. I'm looking at it. I see his theory, but this confuses me even more because I'm like, they wouldn't have to be going in the opposite direction almost. It would have to come. Anyway, we're done with that. So let's move on because it's going to get better because we're going to get to this. When I saw him walk up with the black gloves on, when Alessi walked out with the black gloves on, I was like, uh-oh. I knew. I was like, we're going to be talking about evidence. And what evidence was I thinking was a little weird? Definitely the shirt. So he's going to make a motion for a mistrial with prejudice, and he's accusing the prosecution of misconduct. This is all about him showcasing the back of John O'Keefe's hoodie and how it was presented to the jury. Alessi's going to argue that the prosecution committed this intentional misconduct. They did it dramatically too. And it was misleading. It was because it was suggesting that those holes were caused by a fall. They were caused by him sliding against the pavement when really they were lab tests. Criminalist, I think her name was Maureen Hartnett. She showed that she made cuttings to the hoodie. We saw it. And this was during forensic testing. This had nothing to do with John falling, skidding, cutting open that portion of his hoodie. This was all the testing. So that was a big mistake. Now, I will say, this was an overly dramatic moment, and I think Alessi does this more for the cameras. But okay, rightfully so. It's being broadcasted. He's advocating for his client, and he's got an audience beyond just the courtroom. But the thing is, Brendan messed up. And for the first time, he looked like, when a dog does something bad and their tail's between their legs, he knew he made a mistake. I genuinely think that. Maybe it was intentional. I don't know. Or maybe he's just playing up to it and it looks like he's sincerely regretting it. But I think he knew he messed up. So let's just play a portion. I'm not going to play this whole thing, but let's play a portion.
Confidence in the judicial system, the public's confidence in the judicial system, that prosecutors will conduct themselves with their duty to present a fair trial. That has to be enforced at some point for Ms. Reed to receive the fair trial that she and every other defendant in this Commonwealth is entitled to.
Oh, I want to play a little bit more than that. I was like, wait a minute.
That these holes could have come from events on January 29th of 2022, when in fact the Commonwealth well knows from its own documents, from its own criminal list,
that those holes in the back were caused by their criminalist as part of their examination and sampling of the hoodie. What could be more egregious? What could be more misleading than that? And what could be more important for a context than the alleged collision that never occurred? That's the topic before some of the most significant and probative witnesses in this trial that the Commonwealth has been attacking from the jump of pretrial. They picked the most opportune, sensitive time to pull this stuff. This is intentional. This is irremediable. This is
Irremediable. I want to use that.
on the key issue of this case, whether there was any collision at all. On its own, Your Honor, on its own, this is a mistrial with prejudice. But I add to that what just happened, and I'm not going to repeat or go into other than to reference. This comes on just mere days after the Commonwealth raised the specter of absence of DNA.
Right. So this is a really good point. Not only did they already talk about DNA when they had already agreed, okay, we're going to be really careful about how we talk about it. He purposely brought it up. And now he's bringing up something else about the clothing, same piece of clothing. And he knew that it was cut for DNA sampling. So he already knew. So it's just, you're right. Somebody said in the comments, like, do I really think that he was being sincere about accidentally doing it? Probably not. Now that I'm listening to this, probably not. So he asked for a mistrial. When this was happening and I was listening to everything, yes, I understand. They introduced 2 crime lab documents from Miss Hartnett that clearly shows cuttings made to the hoodie because they had to show the court, right? Can't just say it. You have to show it. They show the actual hoodie in court. They mark it as an exhibit. It was Exhibit 88. And these lab sheets from the notes from the lab detail how and when all these cuts were made to the hoodie in the crime lab, not on the night of John O'Keefe's death. So he showcased all that. And he does accuse Brennan of ambushing the defense, first with the DNA, now with the back of the hoodie. Dr. Wolfe had no notice that this was going to happen. And the defense had no notice because this wasn't evidence. That's a big deal. Now, what I thought was interesting, and I don't know if I have to roll it back for a minute, but the judge said that, I saw that hoodie in the courtroom, and apparently I thought it was shown to the defense, and he was like, no, it wasn't shown to us. It was a stunt. It was to mislead.
On the same hoodie sweatshirt without having the criminalist, Ms. Kuhn from UC Davis come in. I know Your Honor already ruled on that.
Right, so let's move along from
Right,
that.
that's what, and I'm going to come back to this. Why is this occurring, Your Honor? Why is this happening? The Commonwealth has no case. They have no collision. They are desperate and are trying to create evidence of specters of collision where the evidence doesn't support it. So what have we come to? We've come to the manufacture of evidence. We've come to, incredibly, taking a hoodie, a key piece of evidence in this case, and holding up to Dr. Wolfe, the ARCA expert, to try to make it seem like Dr. Wolfe didn't do his job. You didn't account for these holes. How could you be a credible accident reconstructionist when you talk about some holes, but you don't talk about these holes?
Thank you for the definition, Marie. Impossible to cure or put right. Irremediable. Let's use that. That's a good one. So I was going to go forward because I want to see if I can get the judge saying that. Hold on.
And here's another document, chain of custody document.
I can have my own copy.
What just occurred?
Yeah, I wanted to get her saying it, but
So is ZZZ in
9 miles per hour. Your Honor, and if I could please have.
yeah, she said it, but I can't find it. I don't want to go too long, but
And we're
here we
going to
go.
request to give.
Brennan is going to come on and he is going to say what he's going to say. And I guess I found it to be, oh, he also holds it up.
88.
This is when they're putting it
He
in.
holds up the back of the hoodie, which has cuts in the back from the criminalist, somebody from the Commonwealth, a witness in this case, Ms. Hartnett, she's testified, and Mr. Brennan has indicated he wants her to come back and testify, which we welcome. And now what we have is we have holes in the back of the sweatshirt that were dramatically held up to and confronted with Dr. Wolfe, and then the jury sees it.
Mm-hmm. Kind of crazy. Okay, we got to get to Brennan because I don't want, this is kind of long. Okay, here he comes.
Mr. Brennan.
You tell me, he looked like he knew he messed up. Or maybe he's mad he got caught. I'm not really sure.
Your Honor, my brief review of the lab paperwork and looking at the hoodie, it appears that I made a mistake.
Your brief review, he always talks about how somebody didn't look at something like, did you not look through it? Didn't you look through that? Didn't you? You've had this evidence for a while. So your brief look, like this is someone's life on the line and someone's death. Someone died. Somebody else's life is on the line. Their freedom, their liberty. You're going to do a brief look at the paperwork? I wish he wouldn't have started like that if he wanted to be taken more seriously, but okay, fine. He made a mistake. He admitted it.
And so I think what should happen is there should be a curative instruction. There should be a stipulation. The court should instruct the jury that during Mr. Brennan's cross-examination, he asked Dr. Wolfe about holes on the sweatshirt or holes on the back of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt. The parties agree the holes were made by a crime lab technician. This was done inadvertently but should not have been asked.
So what he wants a stipulation, which is usually before. Like they agree to a fact and they're like, okay, we're just going to stipulate that there was a dog in the house. This is not what happened. It was just a bad example, but we're just going to stipulate that this thing exists and we're going to agree on it. It's like, no. A stipulation isn't fair here. That's a stretch. You aren't both agreeing on something. This is after the fact. So I was like, no, it has to be more than that.
The court should strike the questions and the answers, and you should instruct the jury there to completely disregard any questions or answers about the holes in the back of the sweatshirt, and the court should allow the defense to introduce the lab paperwork.
All right. So
What do you think she did?
I'm not going to allow the mistrial motion, Mr. Alessi. What I'm going to do is instruct the jurors. I'm going to put in what's been marked for identification, Y, Z, A, and B.
She's going to let the paperwork in and she's going to issue a strong jury instruction. Let me tell you, another spoiler alert. It wasn't strong. I was shocked when I heard it. I was like, that's all she's going to say? That's all she's going to say? I don't know. You tell me.
4 of each letters. I'm going to put all these into evidence. They can be displayed for the jury, and I'm going to instruct the jury that during the cross-examination of Dr. Wolfe, Mr. Brennan asked him about holes in the back of the sweatshirt and whether or not they perhaps could have come from events or implying or something like this. I instruct you, you are not permitted to draw any inference that these could have come from the events of January 29th, 2022. I instruct you further that those holes were made by the criminalist, Ms. Hartnett, during the course of her inspection and sampling of the sweatshirt on, I just put the dates aside. Chrissy, can I see those, please?
I agree.
It's unclear.
Emerson Aurora 33 said the state had a case. It's just not being presented or prosecuted well. Agreed. I think they do have a case. I think they have a good argument. Their theory is arguable. It is plausible. It is possible. But they have the burden of proof. And they have not done a good job proving that that happened. And then the defense doesn't have to prove anything. They just have to like refute it if they want. And I don't know. This wasn't fair to me.
Clear for me. Do you have a better idea, Mr. Alessi, what day these were done? Is it all of those 3 days? Now I see a 4th day.
That wasn't important, but the jury comes back in. So let's, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. Sorry about that. I am so sorry that I messed up. Okay.
The bag. So, jurors, I instruct you that those holes were made by the criminalist, Ms. Harnett, during the course of her inspection and sampling of the sweatshirt back on May 18th, 2023. Okay? So,
I was like,
I know you're-
what? That was it? That was it? That was it? Like, there was no, to me, I was like, what? I don't understand. There's no explanation. Like, wait, no, I want more. I wanted more. I was like, that's not a lot. But when everything settles down, they have a new witness. Sorry to go right into it, but we only have like a few more of these. John Teddeman. He's a private investigator, former federal agent, owns his own firm called Forum Investigations, graduated from Roxbury Latin School, Princeton University, and then he went to law school at Suffolk Law School. And then he worked as a federal agent, and then he focused on fraud, identity theft when he was working for the government. And then after law school, he decided he was going to run his own law practice. He was doing real estate law. And then he worked as a real estate broker. And finally, he launched Forum Investigations in April of 2024. That was a lot. But now he's focusing on investigation work privately. And he was brought on in this case last minute. I'm talking June 3rd. And you might be like, what? Aren't people not allowed to be brought in? Well, guess what? This had to do with a health issue with another investigator that was supposed to do this. They couldn't appear in court for that reason. So his assignment was to go out to 34 Fairview Road and take photographs and measurements, measure distances. And I've always wanted to know certain distances there from, let's say, the driveway to the doors. He brought his iPhone for photos. He brought a wheeled measuring device. I think it's called a walking odometer, and he recorded the distances. He documented 3 main entrances. I was like, wow, 3? I thought there was only 2. He said it was the main front door, a front side door, and a red door into the garage. So let's take a look at that because I do think it's interesting. Let's skip forward. It's kind of at the end here. And then we'll be done soon. I think we have one more. Where are we? Here we are. Here we go.
All right, Mr. Teddeman, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you. Leaving aside the...
Oops.
Sir, before the lunch break, you had identified 3 entrances to the front of 34 Fairview, leaving aside the 2 garage car doors. Do you recall that?
Yes.
May I have that last exhibit displayed, please? Not
Wait,
that one,
Cuff, were you
the,
talking about this guy? I feel like he did, but we'll get to it.
one that we discussed right before. There it is. Maybe zoom in on that a little. Okay. What do you see on the screen at this point, sir?
I see the 2 rightmost entrances to the house, excluding the main front door.
Okay, which would be obviously to the left
To the
of this
left.
photo, particularly with regard to the 3rd entrance, the one in red. Could you describe that?
So maybe I should give some context because this will make more sense. So there is, oh my gosh, what was her name? Jessica Hyde? Jessica Hyde, am I saying that right? She came in and she talked about data on John O'Keefe's cell phone. And if you'll remember back, there was 80 steps on his phone, I want to say at 12:21 a.m. 12:21 a.m. So this would have been technically before the so-called collision. It would also be before his phone locked. That was the equivalent to 200 feet or 3 floors of stairs, if I'm remembering correctly. So why this person's here is they want to know the distance from the proximity, the vicinity of where John O'Keefe was possibly dropped off. The defense wants to show he got dropped off. He walked said feet, we're going to get to it in a minute. I don't want to give anything away. Said feet, where could that have been? Show me the distances from different parts to different parts. There's 3 doors to this house. We're seeing the 2 side ones of the house on the right side closer to the garage. The red one that you see open is the garage. The one with the set of steps going up is the side door. And then there's a front entrance we can't see in this photo.
Yes, so it's if you're facing the house from the street, you're looking towards the west. So that door goes directly into the garage facing north.
Okay, so basically from the street, you don't have to enter the house, you can go into the garage directly.
That is directly into the garage, yes.
All right, and as we're looking at the house from this point, are we looking at it from the vantage point of Fairview Road?
Yes,
And that is a westerly direction toward the house, sir?
correct.
In the course of doing your further work that you were asked to do in this case, did you peer inside the garage?
Yes, I did.
Did you see concrete steps and a ridge there and a hard concrete floor?
Did you hear the ridge? So there's a reason he's mentioning the ridge,
Yes.
Sustained. Jurors disregard that answer.
and it was sustained.
You mentioned that you were asked to do some measurements. Can you describe what you were asked to do for the jury?
Yes, I was asked to measure from basically the mailbox area of the driveway to the various entrances to the house.
Did you take those measurements?
I did.
Okay, if I'd like to take them one at a time. First, did you measure from the end of the driveway next to the mailbox all the way to the main front door, which is not depicted on this photo?
Yes, I did.
Why aren't we seeing the front door? Did we just miss that?
How did you measure it?
I used my wheeled measuring device, and I walked directly across the lawn to the front door, well, to the bottom of the front steps, and then used it to go up the front steps straight to the door.
And what was the measurement, if you recall, from the mailbox area near the end of the driveway to the main front door on the left?
I believe it was 65 feet 9 inches, but I have notes if I
think you got it right, sir.
Okay.
From the mailbox area, so that would have been on the road, to the main front door is 65 feet 9 inches.
Next, did you measure from that same location near the street, the end of the driveway next to the mailbox, to the second front door, which is actually depicted in the exhibit that's on the screen?
I did.
And how did you measure that?
I walked along the edge of the driveway on the asphalt right next to the grass towards the house from the mailbox and the edge of the street towards the house. I took a left onto the brick walkway, proceeded along that walkway, then took a right to the walkway that you can see right there, heading directly to the door, and went up onto the little decking area, and then those 2 steps directly to the doorstep.
Okay. If you had never been to someone's house, think of this hypothetical. You've never been to someone's house before. You know them, but you're not super, super close with them. They invite you over and you see, let's say you only saw 2 doors. I don't know if you saw 3. Maybe you saw 3. But if you saw one that you had to cross grass and one where you could walk up of a brick walkway, my brain says I would walk on the walkway. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't think I would walk across someone's grass, but then again, if I had been drinking, maybe I would.
Okay, so you walked essentially almost the whole length of the driveway?
Yes.
Before you took the left to get to where the steps start going to that second front door?
Yes.
And then went up to the door itself?
Yes.
Do you recall from your memory what the measurement was?
I believe it was 70 feet 1 inch.
So from that same point to the middle door, which is that door that's on the side, not the red one, to the garage, that was 70 feet 1 inch.
And finally, did you measure from that same end of the driveway near the street next to the mailbox to the red side door, which is the pedestrian entrance into the garage directly?
I did.
How did you measure that?
I did the same thing, walking directly from where the mailbox and the driveway intersect, basically, all the way up the driveway, took the same left onto the red brick pathway, took a right to go towards the front door, went up the 1 step that you can see, and then instead of going up the next 2 steps, I took a right directly towards the garage entry door.
Again, he walks up the brick walkway, which I think is important, and he goes right to the garage door.
So essentially the same path of travel, it's just you didn't go straight into the second front door. You took a right to go into the pedestrian entrance to the garage.
Correct.
And what was the measurement that you discovered having done that?
Well, Marie, we don't know when it happened. Not necessarily. He was found at 6 in the morning, a little bit before 6 in the morning. So we don't know. We actually don't know. So we wouldn't necessarily know how long it would take or when it would have happened. But we know that people were leaving within all these time frames. People were leaving, they were leaving at 12:30, they were leaving at 1, so on and so forth. So what they're insinuating, what their argument is, well, let me get to the footage right now and then we'll go back.
I believe it was 78 feet 3 inches.
So this one was 78 feet 3 inches, which if you're just doing the math to line it up with the 80 steps, because I think most jurors that hear 80 steps are going to think 78 feet, but it could have been 200 feet, even though it was 80 steps, if that makes sense. And that's because steps are different than the feet you do, right? Because we're walking. But what they're trying to show is that theoretically, he could have walked into the garage. Why? Well, you remember how people said, oh, we didn't see him come inside. Well, yeah, that's because he didn't come through the front. If all those people were partying in the kitchen, let's just say someone, whether that's Higgins and Brian Albert, someone could have been standing at the garage door going like, hey, over here. This is just a hypothetical. But it is sort of the argument for an alternative way that John O'Keefe could have been harmed, that he went through that garage where he ended up. Was it the basement? Was it in the garage? Did something happen? Was he confronted? But the point is, they're showing the distance to show it's possible.
Now, finally, could we have displayed the map of Cedar Crest, Fairview, and Chapman? There it is. Sir, are you able to see the street names from where you are? And if
Yes.
not, could we have the top street magnified so that the witness can see it?
I've always also thought, because I'm seeing things in the comments about, Lindsay said, that's my thoughts too. It had to have happened as soon as he got to the door because of his Apple Health data. I disagree, because I think if you threw someone's phone outside, if you're like throwing their phone outside, let's just theoretically speaking, I like to put a whole bunch of hypotheticals out there. And that could account for like why his phone didn't get in, he didn't use it after that, why it got colder. He could have dropped his phone outside. Who knows if they went outside in the back. Just theories. But it could have happened right away.
Okay, you see that?
I do.
What do you see that to be?
If
Cedar Crest Road.
something happened.
Okay, if we could have the connecting street where the
I don't think it was important to go through any more of this, to be honest. This was just him also saying that he looked inside the garage. He saw a ridge inside the garage, and we already went over that, and the judge said that wasn't allowed. But again, John O'Keefe had a laceration on his head, and we haven't heard from Dr. LaPosada yet. But when we do, you'll know why that ridge matters. And I don't think we're going to get to it today because we only have 2 more clips yet. But of course, we're going to touch on a little bit of that. But this aligns with the cell phone data in the location of the home, right? Because it's showing that 80 feet could have been walked. And I think this witness also agreed that walking from the flagpole up the street to any door would have been over 80 feet. So that accounts for that. So I was thinking about my personal thoughts. I was like, okay, what would I be thinking as far as the jury is concerned? Like, would I have been thinking this could have worked? I don't know. I think it's plausible. Like, it's another possibility, I guess. But yeah, and somebody made a point. His Salt said his phone wasn't found in his pocket either. So his body could have been placed there. Somebody could have. Remember when Jen McCabe was calling his phone? How do we know he didn't drop his phone? And they were like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Call it. Or somebody threw his phone. Where is it? We have to. Just theories. Don't get mad at me for just theorizing because that's what we're all doing, right? But let's get to the next part here. Now, this was my personal favorite witness. I don't care who she works for. And by the way, I think I'm watching today's trial. She's been called by Brennan in the past. So she's worked for prosecutors. She's worked for defense. She's worked in criminal, civil, and for a very long time. We're going to get into that in a different video. But this is Elizabeth LaPosada, doctor. She's a forensic pathologist. decades of experience, and she has a soft voice. So they told her to adjust the microphone. So if you're like me and you're annoyed by mouth noises or heavy breathing, I apologize in advance during her entire testimony. It's not this woman's fault. They told her to put the microphone to her mouth. I'm sure you know what that means. It's going to catch every little mouth noise. So be prepared for that, but don't hold it against her. She has extensive medical training. I think she said Bucknell University, bachelor's in bio, University of Maryland, residency at Johns Hopkins in anatomic pathology, a fellowship in St. Louis for forensic pathology, and she's double board certified. Anatomic, did I say atomic? Anatomic and forensic pathology. She taught at Brown Medical School since the early 1990s, and she directed pathology rotations. This is going to be a mouthful. She was also chief medical examiner of Rhode Island from 1993 to 2005. She oversaw suspicious deaths, violent, and unexpected deaths. And also, I thought this was interesting. She has mass disaster experience. She handled two major mass fatalities. Egypt Air Flight 990. I wanted to look this up afterwards. I kind of watch those channels. I don't know why I do it to myself, but I watch the crash channels. But she also handled the 1999 Station nightclub fire. No, the crash was in 1999. Sorry, got them confused. That was in 1999, and the Station nightclub fire was in 2003. So big deal, lots of casualties. She'll get into that in another testimony because today, on this day in trial, there wasn't that much time. But I thought that was interesting. She's also held positions in St. Louis, Philadelphia, and Delaware before Rhode Island. What else? I'm trying to think of what else she does. She also teaches, like I already mentioned. She's board certified. I think I mentioned that already. She also was an EMT. She has a certification in bloodstain and pattern analysis and a bunch of awards, publications, chapters in books. I don't think we need to go into all of it, but she's well qualified. That's why I was a little bit confused why the judge didn't want her to opine on the dog bites, but there was something I want to play for you. I don't always get emotional. I kind of do sometimes, though. And I thought this was the most profound thing I've ever heard. I do a lot of cases, I read a lot of cases. They're sad. But I heard this and I was like, wow, I've never heard this in relation to forensic pathology. And it actually did make me tear up. I immediately told my husband, I like took my headphones off and I was like, oh my gosh, it just meant so much as a human being. Listen what she says.
I want to ask you a really simple question. What does a forensic pathologist do?
Yeah. We are the last doctor that the dead person has, and we figure out what happened to the body to cause their death.
We're the last doctor that a person has it. That if that doesn't make you get teary-eyed like me, I don't know. Maybe I'm super sensitive. That to me was so like sad. But anyway, she's responsible for determining both cause and manner of death. And we've already heard cause and manner of death. And that did hit me the way she said it. I think that would be such an honor. But with the manner of death, because the cause is one thing, right? The cause could be blunt force trauma, it could be strangulation, asphyxiation. But then we're getting into what we already know, the manner: natural, accident, homicide, suicide, and undetermined. And this case had been ruled undetermined, not by her. She was not the medical examiner that did the autopsy. She's looking at the evidence, though. She's looking at the autopsy report, his brain report, toxicology, crime scene photos, his clothing, the taillight, SUV images, police reports, medical records. I think you get the point. So she's using differential diagnosis. Remember that process? Like Dr. Russell? Narrowing down what could explain everything, what makes sense. She was involved in over 10,000 autopsies, personally conducting 3,000, and then she also reviewed thousands. And those included pedestrian deaths, and she's trained to recognize patterns. So I think that's really interesting because Dr. Russell was also doing the same thing. So let's get into some of what she had to say.
Are those injuries consistent with a particular type or pattern of patterned injury?
Yes.
Describe that for us, please.
Wait,
Type
I want you to hear what she said.
I observed that he
in regard to Mr. O'Keefe's head, specifically.
I observed that he had evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of his head.
Are those injuries consistent with a particular type or pattern of patterned injury?
Yes.
Describe that for us, please.
There in the back of his head, a little bit to the right-hand side, was a horizontal tearing of the scalp, and that's called a laceration. And surrounding that were linear scrapes that were vertical in orientation. So that is an injury pattern. And then you have to think, well, what could cause that injury pattern? And so then you go from there.
Did you also, in addition to looking at, by the way, how did you make that assessment about the injury? Was it photographs?
Yes.
Is that a normal way for a forensic pathologist to make an assessment? Is that an acceptable methodology to make an assessment of a wound pattern by the use of anatomical photographs?
Marie made a good point. It was probably colder in the garage, and if Karen wouldn't stop calling me, I leave my phone in there before going in the house. Could be, right? But you made a good point that it is colder in the garage. I would think that it's not as insulated in the garage because I know my garage isn't. I know a lot of people's garage isn't. Kylie has something here. I'm going to get to the doctor in 1 second. Kimber, please make a t-shirt that has you as a cartoon that says, I thought that was interesting. Oh no. Is that becoming a tagline?
Oh, absolutely.
Have you done it before?
Oh, hundreds of times.
What is a coup contra coup injury?
Oh, it's a very interesting, peculiar injury to the head. When you have a blow to the head, the blow can either be the stationary head and there's a blow to it, or you can have the head that's moving and gets the blow. So looking at a pattern of coup contra coup helps the forensic pathologist differentiate that. A coup contra coup injury examines the coup, which is where the impact occurred, and then we look at what's 180 degrees opposite that impact, and that's called the contra coup, or like opposite the coup.
So we talked about this before, and we kind of already know it's the brain hitting against the skull when you do have an impact to your head. But what I wanted to point out, and I kind of went ahead, is that she observed horizontal lacerations to the back of his scalp with vertical scrapes above. I have pictures of this. I haven't shown them other than just like blowing up one little part. But there was a patterned injury which suggested an impact with a ridged surface. And that's why the ridged surface was important, because remember, that investigator just pointed out when he was looking into the garage, he saw a ridged surface. And we didn't get to see it, but that's what he explained. But another aspect that I thought was important was the eyelid laceration, because remember, there's been a lot of talk about where it came from. Dr. Welcher said it came from the spoiler on the back of Karen's SUV. Well, let's hear what the doctor thinks it came from.
Did you see any skin injury to either one of Mr. O'Keefe's upper eyelids?
Yes, he had a small.
Actually, Salt, he was never at this house before. They were never at this house before. That's why they got lost getting there. So this was the first time they were at this house. That's what's been said. I don't think anyone's refuted that or anything, but they got the information from Jen McCabe, I believe, and that's why they needed directions to get there, and he was putting it in Waze, from what I have heard so far. If there's other information I haven't heard, I am always open to understanding more about it.
Kind of slit-like defect horizontal on his right upper eyelid.
Would the ecchymosis on its own produce that type of injury, that laceration over his right eye?
No, the blood seeping down into his upper eyelids was from the skull fractures.
Was the laceration above his eyelid on the right side a separate injury altogether?
Yes, it was.
Yes. So new to the Alberts, not necessarily new to all the people, but wasn't close with them. There were some members of that group that were close through kids, but they weren't like besties, close knit, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Based on your training experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not what that eyelid laceration might be consistent with?
Some application of force which broke the skin.
Could that be from an object?
Possible.
Could it be from a fist?
Possible.
Sustain us to the floor, Mr. Jackson.
Give me some possibilities of what might cause that laceration above his right eyelid.
So it's not possibilities.
Give me, in your opinion, what you believe could have caused or produced the injury to the upper right eyelid.
So I'm going to see your tie bar here.
Okay. She couldn't elaborate. After this, they actually ended everything, and we're going to pick back up in the next one. But I wanted to explain. Somebody just pointed it out. John didn't grow up in Canton. He only moved to Canton when his sister and the brother-in-law died. Thank you. I was just going to bring that up, that he wouldn't have actually had these connections was it not for the fact he had his niece and nephew, because they were involved in the private school. They were involved in the sports. So he started in the last few years getting more involved with the community for that reason. And that's actually how Karen got connected to everyone, because she would take them to certain sporting events where she met Katrina. Was her name Katrina? Kalakisis, I think her last name. That's where she met Jen McCabe. And so they were more connected through the children than they were through each other. It was kind of always like parents' night out when they did get together, and they would sometimes drop the kids off, have a glass of wine. They kind of explained that more in the first trial, I feel like. But since we're done, Cuff is asking, I'm curious with the DNA mistrial issue and now with the hoodie cut issue. Do y'all think there are grounds for mistrial? I'm thinking that it's not going to happen. I think she's just going to keep preserving it for the record and not declaring a mistrial, and then they can appeal it. I don't think she's going to do that. I just don't see it unless there's something like super egregious, because I still think those two remedies that she gave for the things that did happen were like, they could be seen as suitable. I'm not going to say that I agree necessarily, but they, in the eyes of the law, she did remedy them. So it's not as though she just let it slide and nothing was happening. But, and don't worry, I just want to point this out because I don't want anyone to feel weird here if like they didn't know something or they forgot something. So do I. All the time. But because I do these recaps and I write things down and I'm looking at them more than just once, I tend to remember them, but I even forget a lot of things and I'm super exhausted all the time. Um, yeah, and I don't know much of the backstory, to be honest. I just know what happened in the courtroom, like on both trials. So if there's any extra information from Facebook groups and things like that, I am not privy to that because I'm not in any of those groups and I don't do like outside research. I only do, with a caveat, I do watch other YouTubers sometimes and I do watch videos related. But when I mean outside research, I'm not going to John O'Keefe's Facebook page and like scrolling to his first post or in any of the John O'Keefe or like Karen groups or anything like that. I'm not on those. So I'm not as well versed. So that's why I rely on the comments in the chat, because y'all know way more than I do when it comes to that stuff. I only know what I'm hearing in trial. But I did want to say thank you above and beyond everything else. Thank you for coming to these recaps. Thank you for being here, even though I'm a couple days behind. Thank you for analyzing these things with me, talking them through, agreeing and disagreeing. Thank you for being respectful. And also, thank you for being members of my channel or channels. I did post a private video on Patreon / the membership that's on my other YouTube channel today. It ended up being a 2-hour video. I thought I was going to do shorter ones so that I could get them out faster, but it was a deep dive. So there's that. And it's in the top tier, but you know, that is something extra I'm doing on there. And of course, the law baddies. Thank you so much. And also, I hear some people's merch is here. Mine's not here yet, but I'm sure it will come in the next few days. So I wanted to thank you so, so much. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions, you know, on the replay. If any of you are here for the replay, I always try to get to as many of them as possible. But also, Courtney says, make sure to like the video. Yes, of course, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm exhausted, so I am going to leave, but I want to thank you so very much. And tonight, I'm going to be listening to my headphones while I'm putting the baby to bed, and I will have another video for you tomorrow, unless life happens. I am trying on my wedding dress next week, so there might, I mean, I think we're supposed to be done with the trial on Tuesday. Let me know if you heard that. But good night, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and I shall see you soon. Bye. Have a great night.